Welcome to our All About Water info session. For those that don't know me, I'm Bree. I'm the Climate Change Adaptation Coordinator with Horticulture Nova Scotia. Before I go on, I should say that this event is funded by the Nova Scotia Department of Environment and Climate Change Plan for Clean Growth. Just a quick land acknowledgement. So this event takes place in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We honor their enduring stewardship of these lands, waters, and resources. And we declare that we are all treaty people and we commit to living in peace and friendship and striving to build a future built on truth, respect, and honor. And so just a quick agenda for today. I taped up a few agendas throughout the room so you can have a look throughout the day. But after I'm done talking for a couple of minutes, Coastal Action, Jordan and Beth are going to come up. They got a cool demo they're going to do and do a presentation on water quality testing and some of the farm projects that they've been up to. Then online, we're gonna have a presentation by Brian Push. He's gonna talk about improving soil water retention with microbes. Then we're gonna have a presentation, our second one, the last online one for today, by Josh Schuler, and he's gonna be talking about controlled tile drainage and the benefits of automation. Then the rest of the presentations are again in person. So we'll have a break for 10 minutes and then we'll have a presentation by Scott Anderson, who's here already. And he's going to talk about design considerations for farm ponds, pond cleaning, and irrigation wells. Then we're going to have a presentation by Dr. Etienne from Nova Scotia Community College, and he's going to be talking about from monitoring to management, using local water data to support reliable farm water supplies. Then we're going to have about 50-minute lunch, and then we're going to have Dave Wolpen talk about with Felipe drip irrigation for half an hour. And then we're going to have Paul Jones talk about irrigation permits, and then a final presentation by David Ernst on automated watering systems.
Thanks so much, Bree, for the introduction. My name's Jordan. I've been through as well. I'm the Climate Change Program Manager at Coastal Action, and Beth is our Water Quality Project Coordinator. We're happy to be here and talk to you a little bit about the work that we're doing. I was going to start off with a land acknowledgement, but Bree did a wonderful job. Thank you so much for starting us off in a good way. Coastal Action also works across Mi'kma'ki, and we are all treated. A little bit of an overview for what we've got planned for you folks today. I'll just give you a little bit of information on Coastal Action as an organization. I'll pass it over to Beth to talk a little bit about watershed and land use practices and our water quality projects. She's going to give you a little equipment demonstration for those that are interested. We'll bring it back to you to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing on farms recently, and then open it up for any questions. So Coastal Action is a charitable organization based from the South Shore of Nova Scotia that believes in safeguarding a healthy environment for future generations. We've been an organization for over 30 years now, and our mission has been to restore and protect the environment through research, education, action, and community engagement. We've got 5 core teams within the organization. So watersheds and water quality, where Beth works, species at risk and biodiversity, climate change, which is the team that I lead, environmental education, as well as coastal and marine. So we're across all types of landscapes and ecosystems, not just coastal based. We receive direction from a volunteer board of directors, supported through a full-time executive director, and we've been an established member of the Lindbergh County community and beyond since our inception in 1993. Just to kind of set us up for how we operate as an organization, our philosophy is to operate in all matters as a third-party, unbiased scientific resource. We are fact-based and invite all stakeholders to the table to work towards a positive environmental solution. And we're a trusted, respected partner who works honestly beside all levels of government, business and industry, academia, other NGOs, and residents alike.
Start us off the water portion of this with just an overview of watersheds and how water is just so connected in our communities. So we understand the water cycle, but sometimes we overlook all of the factors that influence our water quality. So we have components that are degrading our water quality. We also have components like wetlands and floodplains that are naturally improving our water quality. So this diagram just kind of outlines, it's very systematic when you look at our usage as well. So we need water, we rely on water. It's very essential to everything that we do. So you can see kind of the balancing act between a drinking water supply, wastewater outflow, and stormwater management, and you have your floodplains, and you have sometimes in Nova Scotia we have abandoned mines that can influence our water quality as well. So just a lot of things to think about that sometimes even us daily, like sometimes we're not, while we're doing this water quality work, we're not always thinking about everything. So it's a good reminder that everything's related. And it's a good way to look at it because you really have to look at the big picture when you're trying to understand the watershed, how it's doing. So I just wanted to highlight some of our bigger projects. So your coastal action has been monitoring the Petite River watershed since 2010. So this means every single month, every year, coastal action is out there sampling 19 sites. So you can see the watershed outline on the left, and then on the right, you can see the sample points that we sample from. And it's also, so you can see the Public Service Commission of Bridgewater, watershed area, their drinking water supply. So this monitoring program, it protects the drinking water supply. Because it's so long-term, it can reveal trends that are really only visible through long-term monitoring. It helps guide restoration priorities in the Petite River, so we can kind of zoom in on areas that aren't doing as well and start asking questions on why that is. And then we have, we have heard of the Atlantic whitefish. It's the only place that species exists is in this watershed. And the watershed has issues with acidity from a few different factors. And that is devastating for the whitefish. They can't survive in that water, mostly because once you get into acidities below 5, you're getting into dissolving the metals that are in the geology, and then that's going to kill the fish. So it's really important work. And so, yeah, so that's one of our projects. And the next one is similar, but this one is the Lahey River watershed monitoring project. So this was established in 2007, and same idea, every single month, every year, coastal action's monitoring 15 sites. And this includes laboratory samples as well. So we're doing bacteria samples, a full chemical analysis in the lab. So there's also a water quality index. So it's a scoring card. At the end of the year, it's easy to kind of understand, easy to read. It's just a score. So it's you'll see on the next slide here. This is what it would look like. So we have all of the sites that we sample in the Lahey and how they scored for 2024. So you can see it's also color coded. We didn't get any in the poor range, but we did get some marginal sites. And of course, they're closer to where it's more populated downstream in the Bridgewater area. So, and this data, it's all available. It's publicly available. It's open source. It's on Atlantic Data Stream. I'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide. If you're interested, you can access all of this data that we collect. And then we would encourage, we want the community to be as involved as possible because water is what connects all of us. It's one of the things that we all rely on. And you can see on the left, it's just another kind of presentation of the results. And you can see the watershed in the background. So we were fortunate to help Health Canada with a pilot project over the past year to 2 years. We've been collecting samples. You can see here kind of on the map of Nova Scotia where they're being collected. There's 10 sites And the idea behind this project, Health Canada is trying to understand if there's pesticides in our streams, rivers, how much, what they're detecting. So this information is also all publicly available. So if you search for this project, you'll be able to access all of the data. They'll tell you all of the chemicals that they found in the water. And this is just a snapshot of the results. So for 10 sites sampled, there was 10 sites with detection and 7 with exceedance. And so for 763 samples collected, this is just in Nova Scotia. And 736 with chemical detection, 23 with exceedance. So you kind of get the idea there. Yes, they have it broken down and available if you're interested in looking into that. And another idea behind this program is that this will help to develop kind of a regulatory system based on what they find, and develop the methods and partnerships for a future national monitoring program. So it's happening all across Canada. I just zoomed in on the results for Nova Scotia. So this is what I was mentioning about how the data that we collect, it is publicly available. And so this is where you would access that. This is a nonprofit group in the South Shore, pretty sure, but Atlantic Data Stream. It's an open access platform for sharing information on freshwater health. So it allows everybody to access, visualize, and download full water quality data sets collected by all the different monitoring groups across the province, and also across all of Atlantic Canada. So you can see the map on the left. There's hundreds of data input points that you can see here. So there's a lot of data here if you're interested in checking it out. I just wanted to highlight another project. So Coastal Action is also involved in wetland enhancement construction projects. So the idea here is you can see the picture on the left and right, that's the same place. It's 10 years of difference, but on the left, this was an old shale pit producing acid rock drainage into a waterway with Atlantic whitefish in their habitat. So Coastal Action did a pretty significant reclamation job here, brought in a lot of soil, a lot of plants, and you can see that it established very well on the right. So so if you're aware of any degraded wetlands that could require restoration or enhancement, feel free to reach out if we can help to access the opportunities for funding applications to support that. So for our demonstration, I just kind of wanted to show you what we do when we're in the field and what the results mean. So this graphic, the scale, you can see kind of where things are too acidic. You might not be able to read the print, but basically what that translates to is that fish going to die, and that's well known. They can't survive in that water. And we do find water with low pH like that, especially in the South Shore. So it's something that we pay really close attention to with our monitoring program. You can see, so it kind of gives a good interpretation of graphic. And so I just wanted to show you some of the equipment that just wanted to highlight what the measurements really mean. So when we're measuring temperature, it matters because it controls chemical reaction rates that influences dissolved oxygen levels. It affects fish metabolisms and spawning, and it's important for species at risk like cold water fish. The pH, the acidity or alkalinity on the 0 to 14 scale, it matters because it influences metal solubility. So for example, if it's acidic, you're going to have high aluminum, probably, and other metals like mercury, arsenic. You don't want that getting into our water or our fish habitat. So it affects aquatic life tolerance, and it's a key indicator for acid rock drainage and acid rain impact. The conductivity, it matters because water's ability to conduct electricity, it can indicate dissolved salts or minerals. It can track road salts, wastewater, groundwater influence. It helps identify mixing of water sources, the dissolved oxygen, which for that we use the more expensive machine that's right there, but that's important for fish and vertebrae. Low oxygen indicates organic pollution, stagnation, or eutrophication, which is the human-induced degradation of water quality. Percentage of saturation helps interpret temperature influence, and the total dissolved solid measurement, it estimates the dissolved material concentration and the salinity, obviously, the salt concentration. So just for $40, you can kind of get an idea of a few of those parameters, and then I will show you the YSI unit that we use as well. But I'll just get through next slide here. I wanted to mention the Water Caucus is a volunteer group. It's where I met Brianna and ended up getting invited here. So we meet, well, the Water Caucus meets quarterly, and then we have other committees if you want to be more involved and meet more often. If you can plan, we go to the quarterly session. So if you're interested in joining, the idea is it's intended to be for the community, for everyone, or anybody really who's interested in having conversations about how our water is doing. And it's interesting because with the people from all across the province joining these, you hear a lot of different perspectives. So I find I learned a lot about local issues just from joining these meetings. So if you're interested, there's an email that you can just reach out and they'll let you know how to join. Okay, and I'm going to pass it on to Karen.
So I'm just going to breeze through a few of our agricultural projects that we've been working on here at Coastal Action for the last number of years. The two most longstanding on our team are the Agricultural Biodiversity Conservation Plan, which we call our ABC plans, and our Agricultural Biodiversity Enhancement activities. Recently, these have included installations like shelter belts, hedgerows, riparian planting, fun-air plant seedings, and nest boxes. But those could also include things like invasive species removal, livestock exclusion fencing, or deteriorated barbed wire removal. So a little bit about the ADC program. Biodiversity, of course, is fundamental in agriculture. Ecosystem biodiversity includes all form of life. This is down to soil microbes, bacteria, fungi, and all plants and animals, and so on. Healthier and more diverse ecosystems are considered to be more productive and have a greater ability to adapt to pressures related to climate change and other environmental related challenges. So the framework of this program is pretty straightforward. We bring out a team of technicians to perform ecological resource assessment of the habitat found on the property, along with interviewing the farmers while we're there on site about what practices they're already conducting on farm that might be supporting biodiversity and conservation. From this information, we identify beneficial management practices, otherwise known as BADs. that promote the maintenance or enhancement of biodiversity across habitats and ecosystems. We then develop and write a report for farmers that include realistic and tailored land use options. The ABC plan project is free to participate in, and all BMP implementation is voluntary, of course, at the landowner's own discretion. These are a useful tool for farmers to identify the BMPs that promote maintenance or enhancement of biodiversity on their farms. And the general intent is to provide them with property-specific options that support biodiversity conservation planning within the farm operation. This is mutually beneficial for wildlife in the farm, since increased biodiversity will promote the complex relationships between species that are necessary to create highly stable and functional ecosystems. This can result in more productive cropland, fewer insect pests, improved forage for livestock, and of course, better water quality. So the habitat assessments themselves are aimed at existing wildlife habitats and features, and identifying current practices that may be helping to support biodiversity or wildlife habitat. These assessments are also looking at habitats through the lens of endangered species to identify those habitats that may specifically support species at risk, also known as SAR. These assessments can also help our team to make connections and recommend potential funding sources or partnerships that could assist with reducing the cost and time that can be associated with implementing recommended BMPs. And in addition to the on-farm assessment, we also do a desktop review of the property to see if there's identified SAR critical habitat, nearby SAR sightings, or biodiversity hotspots nearby the area. This can help provide more information on the specific species or SAR that the farmer may see on their property, or may be interested in learning how to identify in the future. And I do want to say the disclaimer that these assessments are considered a snapshot of the property during the assessment time. It's heavily influenced by things like the time of year, of course, the time of day, and even weather conditions. We aren't looking to fully inventory the property or provide information on species abundance. It's simply to identify habitat types, potential species, the habitat that support, and the presence of identified species seen during the assessment. So I just pulled out a few example BMPs here that are related to water or water control on farm operations. And I wanted to highlight a few of the different sections. Some of these reports can be pretty extensive. So a few of the highlighted sections are the habitat map. So we take a view of the property in general and sort of roughly delineate where those habitats kind of intersect and where they change. Existing farm biodiversity and by habitat type, potential biodiversity enhancements and recommendations. And we also always include additional resources and any funding opportunities we're aware of at the time of the report writing. So just a couple of the example BMPs here, things like considering constructing artificial wetlands to improve water quality, exclusion fencing for livestock in riparian areas, or even expanding riparian buffer zones. Which moves us into our biodiversity enhancement work. The first one I'm going to talk about are shelter belts. So shelter belts are a linear arrangement of planted trees and or shrubs that are designed to shield fields, road, livestock, buildings, work areas, and riparian areas from the forces of wind and snow, as well as enhance biodiversity. I'm sure most of you in the room here are familiar with shelter belts and similar installations, but they do have a wide variety of benefits on farm. Here's an example of a recent shelter belt installation we did on a farm that has two separate shelter belt rows, or two separate installations, I should say, of multiple rows each. This is a farm where the farmer had tried to do a shelter belt on their own at low cost and didn't get the survivability of that they wanted to see. So we were able to come in with our technicians based on an initial site visit, which is really great to complement with our ABC project, where we're already there at the site. Work with the landowner on their on-farm goals, what kind of interests they have in specific plant material. We're able to provide all the plant material free of charge and the labor to plant the material as well. So we went in, and you can see here one of our team members with a very large elm tree and plant that material for them. We do find a lot of interest in the shelter belt program specifically, which is really wonderful. Yeah. Few more notes, but I'm just going to move us along. Another one is hedgerows. These are also similar to shelter belts and offer many of the same benefits, but they do focus on smaller shrub and plant materials, so not necessarily trees. These can are often used within fields or around crop plots. So I've got an example here of one we did a few years back with a farm that was situated on top of a hill and had a lot of wind struggles within their crop fields as well. So with that in mind, and they had desired to put in a couple of hedgerows, we worked with them to come up with a planting plan that included a lot of burying and resource producing material as well. And then, of course, came in with the plant material at no charge and planted it, the installations for them. Another huge benefit of these hedgerows is they can be used to attract pollinators and increase pollination, not only from providing resources, but protection from wind. Pollination efforts, as a lot of our native pollinators require wind speeds to be below a certain amount for them to be able to effectively pollinate. So that's helpful to them as well. And then another one, this one's a little bit more related to our topic here with riparian plantings. Riparian areas, of course, are the transitional regions between water courses and land. They contribute to the overall function of a farm in a number of ways. Vegetation within a riparian area helps to reduce erosion and contamination of waterways while providing shade that regulates water temperatures. Additionally, riparian areas contain vegetation and soil that absorb high concentrations of water. This makes them effective not only in times of drought, but also in times of flooding. They can assist with flooding and absorb water and slow the rate of overland water flow. They also support unique and biologically rich habitat that contribute to overall biodiversity. And they serve an important breeding and feeding habitat for many different species, as well as shelter for insects, birds, amphibians, reptiles, snails. And the example I've got on the screen here is just an installation we did in November 2025, just recently. This farmer, like I'm sure many of you, had suffered from the drought conditions that we had over the last field season and decided to dig a new pond. So they asked us to come in and support vegetating area around that to help reduce the amount of erosion and get that kind of riparian buffer established pretty quickly. So we worked with them, of course, to produce the plant material, planting plan. We secured the plant material at no cost to them, and we came in with the team and planted that as well. And I just wanted to give a note, we are currently looking to expand and enhance our agricultural program offerings to support our farmers and farming community. We do really want to hear from the community what is most beneficial. I know a lot of the planting installations are of interest to folks, but if there are other ways that coastal action can be of help to the community, we are always here to discuss opportunities or collaborate. And it also in terms of when we go after funding applications, it can really help to have sites secured that are interested in the projects. So if anyone's willing to chat about that, we can also connect. I've got our contact information here on our last slide, and Beth and I also will be here throughout the day, and we've got some cards as well. If anyone's interested in chatting with us throughout the day, maybe having a look at the equipment we use and discussing any collaborations, we're always happy to chat. So thank you so much. The plant material sourcing can be difficult. We get it from all around. We try to focus our efforts best on native plant material and as genetically local as possible. So we mostly go after smaller nursery operations. There are a few that are local in the South Shore and also a few up in this area that we source from, but it also depends on the time of year and the material that the farmer's looking for. But in the recent years, we have been able to source it all within Nova Scotia. Great question. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. Bree has done a wonderful job of coordinating my talk here, so I'm looking forward to it. And as noted, I've labeled it in the aggregate, improving soil water retention with microbes. The things I would like to go over today are the role of soil microbes in water retention, the water holding capacity principles, some information relating to soil texture and soil structure, which are key to achieving improved water holding capacity in soil. And number 4 here is, the basis for the name of my talk. It's really the soil aggregates, which play a significant role in the water holding capacity of soil, and they're not always optimized. I'll talk some about a clay soil case study on improving soil aggregation, And, my ears perked up during the earlier presentation when I heard that biodiversity includes soil microbes, because they're near and dear to my heart. But there are other things that the same microbes that can improve soil structure do a whole lot of other beneficial things for plant agriculture. So just to start off, the proposition I assert is that soil application of beneficial microbes will improve the water holding capacity of soil. There's a couple of different dimensions for it. You can increase your water holding capacity in certain types of soil. And you can do what I call optimize the water holding capacity of clay soils. Because as you probably know, clay soils hold a lot of water. The problem is they hold it in ways that are not ideal for plant agriculture. So the key microbial players in the parts that I'm going to talk about are beneficial bacteria, what are called arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, and some other fungi species like aspergillus. And as I noted, one of the agronomic bonuses you get if you use this approach to try to improve your soil is that the bacteria and fungi that perform the soil functions also have numerous plant beneficial roles that they can play. They're not so specialized that they work only on soil structure. If you think about water holding capacity of soil, I'm not a hydrologist, but here are some general principles. Soil attributes will influence your water infiltration, the permeability, and the water holding capacity. The primary factors that affect water holding capacity are the soil texture and soil organic matter. In general terms, if you think about soil texture, it would be what you would call the soil type. And I think the triangle on the right sort of deals with the three particle types that you find in soil: clay, sand, and silt. And if you look at them, they are different sizes. Clay particles tend to be small, and that's why soils with a lot of clay are compacted. But it's also why they trap water in maybe not so beneficial ways. Silt is medium-sized particles, and sand particles tend to be larger. The structure of soil comes from how these three types of particles are arranged. And good soil for agricultural production requires all three types of these particles. So if you think about soil structure, what is it? You can see on the right some illustrations of different types of soil structure, and some of them, for those of you who are growers, will look at and say, boy, that's horrible, and they are. But as I said earlier, it's the arrangement of the soil particles, the clay, the silt, and the sand, into stable units that determines the soil structure, and these are what are called soil aggregates. So let's talk a little bit about soil aggregates and how they form. You probably don't need to know this in order to improve your soil, but it's kind of a useful thing if you want to focus on how it happens. What you have are what are called microaggregates, and the microaggregates then collect together to form macroaggregates, and it's the macroaggregates that are the ideal or better soil structure. So the interesting thing about all of this is that the microaggregates have at their core bacteria. And the process by which they work, the other elements that are there is the clay soil particles. There are what are called extracellular polysaccharides that come from the bacteria that are in the soil. You have organic matter, you have silt, you have sand, and you have fungal hyphae, which are the branches that come out from the fungi in the soil. If I were a better artist, I wouldn't have relied on someone else's black and white diagram there, but at least it's quite interesting. So what you see in the sort of small circles in the middle are the bacteria, and then you see the extracellular polysaccharides. You see the bonds form with those little bars. Those are the clay particles. And then you will see the silt particles, which are medium size. You then get the sand particles that get attracted to this. and then you get the beneficial fungi or other fungi that sort of surround this collection of particles and hold them together, in part by producing proteins that function to sort of glue things together. And if you look at just the inset from the earlier diagram, it's just focusing on the circle here is the bacteria, or bacterium. And there's just three different ways that are typically known for how the clay particles will adhere to the bacteria. But that may be more detail than all of us need. Not only am I not a hydrologist, I'm also not an expert on your soils in Nova Scotia, but I did do some reading up, and it seems like there are a lot of sandy soils in Nova Scotia and a fair amount of clay soils, and at least in some areas, there are low nutrient levels. So the question is, or the challenge might be, how can you improve these soils to make them more productive, or to potentially expand the area that's commercially plantable? Here I can talk some about the mechanism again of soil aggregation and how microbes transform the water holding capacity, using as an example clay soils here. So as I said, the bacteria sit at the cores. They produce the saccharides. They create bridges with the clay. They form these stable microaggregates, which are smaller than 250 microns. And then if they're present, you'll get fungal action that trap and bind the three types of particles. And clomiline is sort of the glue. And then you will wind up with these microaggregates collecting together to form the macroaggregates that you want. So what you get is improved water holding capacity because of the structure. And you can, in clay soils, what you avoid is the negative part of clay soil, which besides the compactness is also the waterlogging. And when you have better soil aggregates, you get oxygen in the soil. And that oxygen is useful for both microbes and for plants. And other organisms like earthworms and things like that are in the soil. You can also, although I don't have the details of it, transform sandy soils in a similar fashion. To do this, you do have to have the presence of an adequate supply of clay and silt in the soil to at least have the components that are necessary for the formation of the macroaggregates. And as I mentioned, here's sort of a case study of clay soil, what I call a success story. This is in Sheridan, New York, which is in the extreme western part of New York, not a couple miles from the Lake Erie shore. And it's what I would call a small plot study. There's about 2 hectares of land with highly visible clay content. There was about 20 years of poor performing vineyard farming there that did not do very well because of the clay. And about 20 years ago, the owner converted to growing corn in the plot. And then a couple of years ago, starting in 2023, the grower applied a product that our company makes, which is a consortium of 7 plant beneficial bacteria, mostly to promote, the purpose of it was to promote the growth of the corn. With increasing uptake of nutrients and all those sorts of other things that the bacteria can do. But after 2 years of applying it, in the spring of 2025, the grower, who uses a sort of somewhat conventional tilling practice, tilled the soil, and he saw that there was no visible clay anymore in his soil. And there was improved tilth. This is a kind of very dramatic change, and even I was shocked to see that it happened. And maybe it is just a fluke, or maybe all the circumstances in that soil were right for this kind of rapid change. But I think the basic principle you have is that whether it's in 2 years or a longer period of time, over time you can improve, just like you would do with other sorts of things that you might do to add organic matter to your soil, to apply lime or other products to change the pH. and so forth. A lot of these things don't happen in one growing season. It takes a while for them to have their impact. And I think, as I said, the interesting thing to me is that the microbes that you can add to the soil that will produce these changes in your soil structure are not just doing that. And here's just a list of the other kinds of things that you get associated with it. Or you could look at it the other way around and say, I like all of these things that you could do for my plants with bacteria and fungi. And the ancillary benefit is an improvement in soil structure and soil health. But they will do things like nutrient uptake. They accelerate the NPK uptake, the secondary nutrients, the micronutrients. An important part of what soil bacteria, by adding them, can do with the right species is they will accelerate the natural process by which there's what's called nutrient mineralization. And that is the breaking down or changing of the chemical structure of things that are in your soil that are not useful for plants in the form that they are. And over time, these things will happen, and that's where a lot of the nutrients in the soil come from. To me, the interesting part of all this is that there are huge reserves of, typically in most soils, of phosphorus and potassium that are in forms that plants can't use. You know, by a lot of estimates on typical soil in North America, 90 to 95% of the phosphorus that's in the soil is not available to plants. The same is true of potassium. So what do? We buy fertilizer and add these things in a form that the plant can use. One of the other important things that happen with soil microbes is they convert organic forms of nutrients into plant available stuff. Another very useful and to me somewhat fascinating process is that when you apply fertilizer, if you have iron and aluminum in your soil, very rapidly the iron and aluminum will bind up the P in your fertilizer. And it's a fairly tight bond that's not going to break easily, but there are plant beneficial soil bacteria that can break those bonds and bring the phosphate back into a plant usable form the way it was in the fertilizer bag or tank. You can get nitrogen fixation. So all this sort of leads to fertilizer efficiency, which can have dollars and cents implications if you're a grower. It also has significant environmental benefits. If you can reduce applied fertilizer, you probably reduce a lot of the runoff and other things that happen that may not be as beneficial in the long run to using conventional fertilizer. And the microbes will break down organic matter. They can also address things like abiotic stress from drought, abiotic stress from cold and freeze, abiotic stress from heat. Through a mechanism which I won't describe because we won't have the time, the same microbes that can improve the structure of your soil can trick your plants into not realizing that they're growing in highly saline soils. So if you have salt-affected soils, you can actually significantly improve the performance of your crops. And we have some studies that we've done that actually kind of very, very favorable results. And an interesting part of it all, if you tie it back to forming the soil aggregates, is that the bacteria species that form the cores of soil aggregates can be unlocking the potassium, which is in a lot of the potassium is going to be in your clay soil particles. And the same consortium of bacteria also has nematicidal and fungicidal properties because most species of plant beneficial bacteria in the soil have a whole array of functions that they can perform. So, you know, for growers who are organic or are organic growers, these are naturally occurring microorganisms. They've been tried and tested in field use for us 15 years, for many people longer than that. our company has been in the plant beneficial microbe field for about 30 years. Our products are OMRI listed, as are most products that people market in the US anyway. Our products are, and many others, use a consortium approach, which means you don't just have one species of microbe, you have several species. And as I said earlier, you can get multiple benefits. You can improve soil health, and you can support water management, sustainable and regenerative agriculture with this approach. So I can sum up, sort of going back over things. As I said, soil attributes influence the water holding capacity of your soil. The texture is a primary factor affecting the water holding capacity. The texture is determined by the proportions of clay, silt, and sand in your soil, which is not something you can easily change, but the arrangement of the clay, silt, and sand, coupled with the microbes that play a part in the arrangement, will determine your soil structure. The bacteria cores and the fungal bindings play the major role in producing the structure that you're trying to accomplish or achieve. They form the microaggregates. The microaggregates become macroaggregates if everything is going well. And these are essential soil structures if you're going to have adequate water holding capacity and overall soil health. So you can improve the soil tilth of sandy soil, problematic clay soils, all to the end of water holding capacity. And it's an interesting phenomenon because it's a combination of soil science, hydrology, microbiology, botany, and agronomy. So, and I will leave you with the thought, since our focus is on the soil and the plants in the soil. By some estimates, the surface area of the roots of all the living plants in the world is about 15 times the surface area of the planet. So there you have some contact information for me, and if anyone has questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Any concern about introducing bacteria or fungi to an area that's not native to that area?
Did you hear that question, Brian? I can repeat it.
I did, and it is a concern that people have raised, and there are several dimensions to it. Most of the species that are in commercial products are going to be in your soil already. The question is, how much of them are there? You can disrupt the existing microbial populations because you might be introducing things that are competing for the food. But if you have soil that's struggling, I mean, we've got a lot of soils around the world, and particularly in the more advanced societies, I guess, where agriculture is more fine-tuned. There's a fair amount of evidence that pesticides damage soil microbes. There's a fair amount of evidence that fertilizer can damage soil microbes and disrupt the microbiome of your soil. In some sense, you could view it as restoring that. I think in salt-affected soils and oftentimes in clay soils, you actually have deficiencies of soil microbes from what's ideal. But yes, there is the possibility of disrupting things, but you may be disrupting something that's not actually functioning properly or usefully. And you can compare the sort of microbiology of soils in certain areas to the microbiology of other areas where there is a better balance. There are higher numbers of naturally occurring and naturally existing soil microbes. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Thank you.
Sounds good. I appreciate the opportunity. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I just want to speak a little bit about Agridrain and the smart drainage system. Talk a little bit about applications and how it's used, how it can be used, and some of the systems that we leverage to do that. So first off, I always start with the question, what are water control structures? I think some people have a good indication in their mind. There's definitely been different versions of them over the past from different providers. But Agri-Drain is pretty much the standard when it comes to water control structures in several environments. And we'll talk about the different applications that we serve. But the quick definition of a water control structure is a structure that allows us to restrict or adjust the level of water flow either through like a tile main when it's coming through an ag drainage system. It could be for retention in a reservoir, allows us to set the level and distribute, as in this 3-chamber where we can actually hold back a certain amount of flow and then discharge to functions like saturated buffers or bioreactors or other treatment options. We build 2-chamber, standard, 3-chamber, and we also build 4-chamber and can customize them any way that we want. So it really gives us a lot of options when it comes to how people need to leverage them and what their main goals are. This is an example of a 4-chamber where we have 2 side discharge that can be controlled independently, either by an actuation gate or by manual stop logs. The most common application that people think of water control structures for is in ag. Here's a couple examples of water control structures that are installed on main outlets. So when I say main outlet, this would be the final culmination of a tile drainage system before it outlets into either retention, into a drainage ditch, into a county main, some kind of an outlet or discharge point. And within these structures, we can either run them manually or automate them. Allows us to control either on a schedule to be reactive to water levels based on rain events or other subsurface water level changes in the water table. Allows us to add monitoring for constituents, other sensors. So really kind of opens up the door for us to look at how we're going to leverage the water in our system. If you look at retention control, we also have structures that are used for water level control of retention basins. So that could be ponds, lakes, what have you. We have some that are used for Ducks Unlimited type of enclosures or reservoirs where they can adjust it based on seasonality, not just water level changes. And again, that allows us to monitor the level of that said reservoir and really dictate the discharge rate if that's a concern. When you start looking at treatment options, we talked about the 3 and 4-chamber boxes before, allows to designate X amount of volume to be discharged or discharged at a specific level. Allows us to dump it into different systems. There's several out there, but 2 prime examples of treatment structures that are out there are bioreactors, which are essentially subsurface chambers that have been made out of combination of plastic and wood chips of a certain species, depending on exactly the type of water that you're trying to treat and the type of constituents that you're trying to deal with. And filters through, and the nitrates is eaten up by the carbon in the wood chips. Then you have phosphorus boxes, which is something that's relatively new. These are actually phosphorus trap boxes that Agri-Drain builds. There's some other examples of this type of technology. It's fairly expensive to do until now. We've really been able to bring the cost of that down. But inside these structures, there will be, in this example, there are buckets filled with bags of certain types of material for actually treating the phosphates as they drain out of this is an ag tile drainage system. One thing to note is you're never able to treat 100% of the water that goes through at a peak event. So you get in a late spring or early summer rain, it's just very heavy rain. There will always be some level of discharge because designing these large enough to treat 100%, it would be cost prohibitive as far as the type of structures and or bioreactors and phosphorus treatment systems. We also do a lot of structures in mine reclamation and treatment options. So non-ag environments, whether it's treating discharge or retaining discharge from a mine that's being reclaimed to go into treatment ponds. based on a schedule. So a weekly release or a daily release after a certain amount of dwell time for it to be treated, or other treatment options that are out there. So the system is very flexible. Really, the only thing we need to understand is the water caustic. If it is, we just upgrade the hardware inside of it to be either 304 or 316 stainless steel instead of our standard aluminum. So we're in quite a few different applications. So why do we really want the water control structure? I've kind of briefly hit on it, but I'm going to really talk majority of this through from an ag perspective, and really more row crops, corn, soybeans, but it can really apply to any type of agricultural crop. The one downside of tile is that it's a 24/7, 365 application. In other words, it's tile's job is to maintain water level and draw down any excess water to maintain the water table in a given area based on the tile depth spacing, things like that. That's also its downside. It's running all the time. So to stem that gap or to give ourselves some control and some a huge lever to gain the benefits of tile when we want to discharge the water, but also to retain what water we can when you get into the dry periods of the summer. I mean, normally wet springs, dry summers, especially where I come from. We're able to put the water control structure on the end of the main, and then we can set the level of either the stop lugs manually. We can set slide gate valves via automated controls, do that over schedule or being reactive, and we can do that over 4 main seasons. When you look at it from that perspective, it's really, we've got 4 periods that we definitely want to change the behavior. Spring and fall is open the gates, let a full discharge go through. Summer and winter, we're going to have either full gates, so closed off and hold back as much as we can safely, or summer, holding back at a proper level for the crop that we're growing. So if you look at spring, our main goal here is to evacuate the water, dry down the surface and warm up the soil so we got a nice, good, warm seed bed so we can take advantage of the early season, get a full season, growth season for our crops. When you go through into the fall, that's the other time that we're going to open up the gates. Really, the biggest reason for that is that we want to, again, dry down the soil so we're not mudding out crops. If you happen to have a wet fall, get everything ready so that if we do any fall tillage, fall application of fertilizers or chemicals or anything like that, again, we're going into a nice drier, warmer seed bed or soil profile so that you get better application. Summer, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we really make or break the tile system and the advantage that we're buying here. So in the summer, standard tile evacuates the water 24/7, 365. If we put a water control structure on there, we can actually limit the discharge. We never actually shut it up completely off. Any excess over our stop logs will always evacuate. We don't change the drainage coefficient of the tile, but allows us to hit that target depth for the root zone at the appropriate growth stage. So whether it's corn or soybeans or other crops, they're going to have a sweet spot where they prefer the water level to be, and you don't want the roots to be saturated. You don't want it to be too far away from the roots. You want to be able to hold it right at that right level. So with our water control structures, whether manually or automated, we can adjust the stop logs or adjust the gates levels and what we retain to hold it at that specific spot. The biggest benefit of that is obviously we got more direct access as water if it's available. We're not manufacturing water, so we're only able to retain what's there, but we're able to retain it for hours, days, and weeks further into the growing season, which really helps us improve yields, reduce drought stress, which in turn helps reduce disease pressures and just the overall health of the crop. So it's really a win-win from a water quality and especially from an ROI perspective when it comes to making money on crops. In the winter, during the fallow season, this is where 40% of our nutrient discharge occurs, is from fall harvest through until spring. So that November-ish to end of February, March timeframe, depending again on what latitude you're in, what that timeframe really is. But we would set the water level to be holding within 8 to 12 inches of the surface. So we're holding back as much water as we can safely. Again, any extra discharges out of the system, so we're never going to flood the system, but that allows us to slow that system and let the natural bioreactor, which is the field, break down those nutrients, retain them. You've already paid for them. We don't want to discharge them from water quality or from a financial standpoint. The different types of control that we have for this, again, you've heard me mention manual. So a standard structure has manual stop logs. We have thousands upon thousands of these structures spread across the globe doing exactly this type of application. User just picks up the stop logs to allow discharge at a lower point or pushes them down to stack up the water to hold it at a higher discharge point. Manuals work great. The only challenge is they're manual, which means someone has to go to move the stop logs, make manipulations of the system. To kind of bridge the gap, we have slide gate options, which is one step away from automation. We have slide gate valves, which we use in our automated systems. You still have to manually pull them up, but you don't have to pull up an entire profile of stop logs to be able to discharge, at full flow of the system, which we talked about, spring and winter or spring and fall for the system. So we do have lots of options to allow that to make that easier. But the biggest challenge again we have is time. People being timely with making adjustments or being able to access and make adjustments at all. So when we look at that, automation really is the key to allow us to do that without concern or fear. When we're looking at the system, the questions that commonly come up is, well, I don't want to stop all the water from discharging. I paid for tile, I want it to go. Well, that's true. We never truly stop the water. We're just holding it back at a correct level. And that management is the key, right? We've given you a big lever, but you got to use the lever properly. So we can go through and set the correct level at the correct time so that we can safely hold it back. So we're reducing any nutrient loss that we can as much as we can. It's never 100%. So we're improving quality, but we're definitely improving yield because we're allowing crop access to that longer into the season. So when we look at it from a purely financial aspect, whether it's soybeans or corn, on top of a standard tile system, when you add a water control structure, we can add another 5 to 15% more yield on average. Some years it's not going to be quite as much, but other years it may be more. It really depends on the type of climate that you have and the type of way the system's designed. But when you look at that from a dollars and cents standpoint for soybeans and corn, that's another $50 to $150 USD that you can be making per acre every year just by having this. And on top of that, it helps us reduce the ROI period of our capital investment. So we just spent a ton of money on a tile system, allows us to reduce that payback period by another 10 to 30% or more, depending on what it was. Lets us plant sooner, better seed bed, build a better, deeper crop root system, which by default will help us be more drought tolerant, less disease pressure, just a more healthy crop, regardless of what type of crop it is. Let's just get further in that growing season. Again, we're buying hours, days, and weeks into the season, which certain periods of time, it's absolutely crucial. But the one thing that I think people most overlook, you've heard me talk about time. They don't value their time. They don't have the time to go out and manage structures appropriately. As with any tool, if it's used properly, it works great. If not, you're not going to get the outcomes that you're looking for. So when we look at automation, it takes away 70% or more of that labor cost. Some systems, it takes away all of it. Really, the only labor is either looking at a website or setting your schedule for the year once and set it and forget it. We found that a lot of manual systems, they get neglected because people don't have the time. They forget about it. It's not something they're used to doing as you go throughout the season. So we really tried to lean into automation. And when we look at automation, the next question I get a lot is, well, how does it work? Well, on a tile system, we know that water gathers in the laterals down to the mains and goes to discharge. The water control structure on our fully automated remote level systems, we use a water level sensor so that we can monitor where this water is. We also have local systems that just open gates on schedules, but we're really trying to maintain the appropriate water level at a given time. System sees that the water level is too high, opens a gate to discharge. I always reference it as, think of it like popping the cork on a tub. We're going to drain water for a period of time, then close the gate and check and see what it is on our remote multi-level systems. But but we do have options, right? I think a lot of times people think, oh, automation, that must be expensive. And in the past, there was times when it was, but we've really opened up the gamut where it's a very cost-effective way to do it. And frankly, with the time savings and the undervalue that people give to their own time, it's really a bargain. But we have two major types of automation. We have locally programmable, which means it's controlled via an app over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi through a web page, or we have remote, which is cellular connected. In other words, it can be anywhere we can access, we can control, we can change schedules, change behaviors, anything about it remotely. But there is a cellular cost to that annually. On our local systems, every one of the systems can control up to 2 gates. So in a system that we recommend for locally programmable, we're actually doing what we call a 3-level. So first level is level 1 is the bottom gate, full drainage. Level 2 is what we call our in-season gate. So this would be set at whatever the sweet spot is for the crop and your types of soils. 18 to 26 inches is usually kind of the sweet spot. Again, will vary a little bit. And the level 3 is the top stop log. That's set for fallow season. Once these are set in automation, we never touch the stop logs again. The only thing we do is potentially shift the dates at which we control each one of these gates, and they're controlled independently based on those schedules, based on your planting date. So once we know your planting date and the length of your hybrid and the type of crop needs that you have, then you can set these up and you set it and forget it. And we don't have to deal with anything there. Each system comes with a solar panel and a battery, so it's completely independent, requires no external power or anything like that. It's well out there and function. Even if we lost the solar panel, it should last for more than a week before there's any concern of things happening if you're in a period where you're going to control. But the 1000 system or series system is one that we just released. This is actually Bluetooth app-based, iOS, Android, doesn't matter. We can set up the schedule for the entire year and set it and forget it and let it do its thing throughout the year. Our 3000 series, this is our reactive system. In other words, this one's cellular connected. It does have a water level sensor in it. You can set this set point anywhere that you want at any time, all being pushed from our dashboard on the website. We can see every 10 minutes, it sends up telemetry, says, here's my current water level. If there's any rules, like we're above that set point for X amount of time, then the system will say, hey, I've been above that for an hour or whatever my time period has been set at. I'm going to open for an hour and bring that level back down and report back. With our remote system, it also allows us to add sensors. So we have systems now where we actually have multiple nitrate sensors as an example. They put a sensor at the top of a bioreactor, so we can see what the nitrate levels are coming into the system. And then there's one at the bottom or the discharge of the bioreactor so that we can see what the treatment level is. So you can see in real time how effective that bioreactor is being at treatment, because bioreactors do have a limited lifespan. The lifespan of your wood chips could be 10 to 15 years, depending on what the levels are and how well it's maintained through there. We can also measure flow. So if someone wants to remotely monitor flow or control and monitor flow, we can look at that in our 3-chamber structures. So there's a lot of options for us to go through and see what do you need, and then we can customize the system to make sure that we're accomplishing that for you. And again, all this comes back on the reactive systems, comes back to the dashboard. It's easy to use, tells you what your system state is, what your gate position is, voltage, temperature, last 24 hours of behavior or water level, current water level, and then your rule set. So this all summarizes, it's accessible via any device, phone, tablet, computer. And we have a lot of people that use phones, so it is very user friendly, even on a small screen. So it is flexible for that. The last thing I wanted to mention is when we talk about water level control structures, there's an area of influence. Depending on the slope of your field, how the tile system was designed and implemented, that may be the entire field and maybe a subset of the field where we have direct influence. In other words, we're going to slow the water from all of the field, but there's going to be an area of the field where we're going to have a lot more direct control of that water level where we can say, hey, it's 24 inches below the surface. We know in that area it's 24 inches. When you start talking about area of influence, one way that we can extend that without putting another water level control structure that sticks above ground is we have inline water gates. So these actually allow us to stair step into the topography of the field by installing these water gates. And they simply hold relative head pressure. So whatever structure or whatever water level is maintained in the structure, we're going to hold that amount of head plus 6-inch lift or 12 inches. We even have a 24-inch lift. So it's going to be that plus that lift. And again, that allows us to extend that direct control further into the topography. And we can stagger these or stack these in line on your mains to go further and further into a system depending on your topography that you have. So that allows us to extend that without having anything above ground to potentially be an obstacle in the field. I know I went through that pretty quick, but love to see if you guys have any questions or anything else I can answer.
The inline valves, how are they controlled?
Did you hear that, Josh?
I didn't get all that.
The inline valves, how are they controlled?
These inline water gates?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. So these are float controlled. So again, it's based on relative head pressure. So head pressure, water level gets set at the control structure and feeds back against this float, which closes this flap. And as long as the head pressure above the system, in other words, at the top of the hill coming down, does not exceed the lift. So we talked about 6, 12, 24. As long as it's not holding it above the level of this structure plus 12, then we're going to maintain it. As soon as it exceeds that, these floats will be over pressurized and this gate will open and allow the system to drain the water. So we're never fully stopped. It's always going to be relative. As this level drops, so does the amount of head pressure that this maintains. So the level drops there as well. Otherwise, there's no moving parts. There's no electronics in them. These are all buried. Anytime that the system opens, if there happens to be any trash in the system at all, it automatically gets flushed. These floats come out of the way, so it's a straight line for it to flush through the system. So we haven't had any of these fail that we're aware of. That was the next question.
Yeah, as Bree mentioned, Scott Anderson is my name. I'm from AFC in Charlottetown. From away, as they say in PEI. Just for reference here, my background is in soil and water engineering, and I've done a lot of work in the past, mostly PEI, but some work regionally as well with irrigation drainage PEI industry. So when Bree asked me today to do this, first it was pond construction. Oh yeah, we can do half-hour easy on pond construction. So well, maybe let's do pond cleaning and irrigation. Well, a little bit of irrigation. So this is going to be touching on a variety of different subjects, but focusing on those three. And I will be around for the day. So if anybody has questions on anything I talk about, you just come see me and we'll have a chat. All right, so when we talk about water supplies, we always have to ask the question, what do you need it for? How much water do I need? So a lot of the information you see today comes from a manual that was developed actually in the region here a few years ago. I'll show it at the end. So these they should be fairly local recommendations. And just looking around the room and talking to people, there's a variety of different applications here. So you can see it's kind of all over the map. Gallons per month per animal is usually what the report, how they report it. And if you're into livestock, that's kind of the recommendations. Household use is different, 1,500 gallons per month per person. And fire protection, just kind of a catch-all recommendation I found was about 100,000 gallons. When it comes to irrigation, though, you increase numbers very quickly. And when you do, there's a equation that you use to figure out how much water you need for any given crop. And those are just some snapshots of some common crops in the region here. You know, potatoes, where I come from, deal mostly with potatoes, but apples, berries. Overall minimum requirements, you're going to need at least 6,000 gallons per day to do irrigation correctly. So how do we get that water? Ponds. I've been doing irrigation ponds since about 1995. I remember that because pond on the right, building that when my daughter was born, so I remember the date. But typically there's two kinds of ponds that they're built in the area. Dugout ponds, or excavated ponds, like in the West they call any pond a dugout. And they're pretty simple to build. You just as it says here, dig a hole in the ground, but it's really not that simple. And there's surface water collection ponds. Hard to see in this one, but you know, you basically dam up the lower area of I'm not going to say a water course, but it's path that the water travels. So basically, you make a dam and you collect water in times of overland flow. It's a little trickier, and I'll get into some of the engineering principles for doing these. Here's an overhead shot. That first one I showed you, 1995 when we built it. It is right here. This is a current Google Earth picture, a year or so old. You can see it's all kind of grown over with vegetation now on the sides. Doesn't look as nice when they're brand new. Kind of like a car when you buy it, they look nice when they're new, but after a while they get kind of beat up. But some of you probably know Brookfield Gardens back in the central PEI. That's where we did this work. And they have two ponds. The first one is this. It's kind of mostly a dugout pond. But if you go over to the top left, here's another larger one. It's one of those ones that we dammed up at the lower end. And the watershed feeding this one is quite large. I don't know the numbers, but there's a couple hundred acres at least flowing through that spring. And what the guys do, the actual, call it a stream or water course, goes down the side, but this whole area floods spring. So what we're doing is we're trying to tease the water to go into our holding pond in the spring. The first one that we did, 95, you can see they've done a lot of strip cropping and diversion terracing, so they have diverted some water back down towards this pond to, again, force the water to go in. Because the trick to building a pond, once you know your water use, is recharge. Unless you want to store every single gallon of water you're going to use, to decrease your cost primarily, you have to find recharge. That's the trick. Either through the cheapest way to do it is by gravity, for sure. This way too, this is kind of an engineered approach to gravity and flow, but what we do a lot back home at PEI, what we used to do is supplement ponds with with wells, low capacity wells. And I apologize to any of the government agencies here who deal with regulations, because I'm going to talk about where I come from. I'm not sure on the regulations in Nova Scotia right now, but up until 2 years ago at PEI, a low capacity well was anything less than 50 gallons per minute. I talk gallons per minute, I talk US gallons per minute, because in the water industry, it's all US gallons. That's how things are rated. So what the people did there, they would build on back. Yeah, these two would be a good example, dugout ponds. And people would put low capacity wells. I say wells because in a lot of cases, you're looking for a lot of water. If you spaced your wells appropriately around your site, didn't interfere with either your pond, the other well, you would have a series of low capacity wells that would keep feeding your pond. And to figure out how much water you're using, and it's just math. Your output, your gallons you need, I'm going to shoot this up, is your outflow minus your input. So when we build a pond, let's say it's for potatoes, let's use a potato example, 38 potatoes. You're going to need extra source unless you want to store every drop you need. And the rule of thumb we used at the time, hole in the ground lets you dig. If you know the recharge you're going to have, you store about 2.5 applications of water. That was kind of the general rule of thumb. That kept it all within a reasonable price. Okay, when we select a site, too, every pond is different, every site is different, but what we look for is soil type. You got to know your soil types, and the easiest way to determine your soil type is a backhoe. Test pits are the most important thing you can do when figuring out where to build a pond. And again, I mentioned the recharge. That you once you find your site, then you got to figure out how you're going to put water in this thing. What you're looking for when you dig these holes is bring clay, heavy clay. You can get away from it a little bit. I haven't done any with bentonite or bentonite liner. It's just too expensive. But in some cases, if you don't have a heavy enough clay, but it's almost there, one trick that we learned, if you when you're at that kind of, before there's any water going to the pond, and if you're able to get a sheep's foot roller in there, the way a sheep's foot roller is set up on the drum, basically it shears that soil, and then that will just kind of change the physics of your soil a little bit to allow for better storage. And also, any pond needs an outlet, and you'll see an outlet in the background there. I'll talk about that. But also, above that outlet, above your normal operating level of your pond, you need freeboard, because you want to be able to get around this thing. Have it wide enough that you drive, let's say 8 feet, drive a side by side or even small pickup. Outside slope 1 to 3, inner slope 1 to 2. Again, the 8-foot top width and depth is pretty important as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about pond cleaning here in a minute, but we've never had any major issues with PEI with water quality in ponds, because every pond that I've been associated with has been at least 10 feet, usually around 12 feet is what you're looking for. And a little bit of recharge going into your pond, constant or semi-constant basis, keeps that water moving. And there's quick formula you can use there to your volume at a 1 to 2 slope. That gives you approximate gallons you're going to have in your. As I mentioned, overflow is crucial. I don't know, not too many of you guys are engineering water geeks like me there, but a couple of years ago, California, the Oroville Dam, the highest earthen dam in North America. They had some major spring rains, and they were in an overflow situation. And the dam, I think the catchment area is about 2.5 million acres. And just a quick calculation, 30 acres can produce 12,000 gallons per minute. So down there, you can see videos on YouTube of this thing overflowing. Chewed out the side of the mountain pretty much and trying to fix it there. That's for reference, that's a D8 down there at the bottom. But 30 acres, like getting back to the level scenario here, 12,000 gallons per minute. That's a 24-inch pipe culvert going full. Yeah, just a little more on overflow. What we've used, we've tried a few different things, but what we tend to use are rock shoots, where they're very dependable. And if you have issues with them down the road, they can be very fixable. See, just a schematic of a rock shoot there, just a picture. And they vary in size depending on your application and your settings. What we do not use is like the standpipe pipe through a worm. They're trouble. We're prone to trouble, especially something like this. You know, in this climate, it freeze thaw. Get a couple feet of ice on there, and it helps that. We're done. Okay, a little bit about pond cleaning and keeping your water in good quality. I'm not going to go into much detail here, but the two common methods, I'm going to say three actually. First one, like I said, water depth. Keep your pond as deep as possible. That keeps it relatively cool. But you can see some of the typical things that happen to a pond here. You get that algae on the top, warm water, and just a muck, slimy layer at the bottom. One of the easiest ways to get away from this situation is to do this, aeration. And I don't have a lot of experience with aeration, but there's lots of things you can buy that are fairly easy to set up, and I don't think they're real expensive to do. And today, these days, like off-cut and things like that, I would imagine they would be something you could get paid for as well. And here's just some standard aeration installations in a small pond. And if you have electricity on site with that way, or if they're remote sites, there is off-grid options available. I think that picture there is from the Home Depot website. Another method is coagulation. Basically, they add aluminum sulfate, like they broadcast it on the pond, and it'll settle out all these organic compounds. Bottom. There's some kind of cool pictures. There's just one there. The guys driving around in a boat, tanks on it, and the color just agitates enough. I saw one I got a copy though off the internet. Farm pond. They had a little dory tied off in 4 corners of the pond with an outboard motor on it, and they just run the motor and dump bags of aluminum sulfate into there, and it just stirs it up. There's a site there, excuse me, Agriculture Canada. It's got some guidelines on water quality in ponds. So you gotta take a quick snapshot of that, or just contact either Bree or myself afterwards. We can give it the address. All right, I'm going to talk a bit about irrigation wells now. groundwater wells. And again, caveat, I do not know the current regulations as well. So, hoping maybe, I think there's something out there that could enlighten me a little bit. But the choice of your well depends greatly on your application. And I'm just going to show you some of the applications that I've been involved with. I worked in Charlotte at AFC, and we have our own research farm. Some of you maybe have been there or know it. And we have several blocks of drip irrigation at farm. And then we use groundwater for those. And this is one of those low capacity wells I talked about earlier. They're all, that's in them, it's rated for 50 gallons a minute. Yeah, and mind you, those regulations changed like a couple of years ago. They're less cyber friendly now. Back then, I think the for low capacity well is down like around 10 gallons per minute now. But a well is, in my mind, if you can do a well irrigation, that is the way to go. I'm going to give you a lesson in hydrology for another half hour. But basically, when you're doing an irrigation well, two things you have to be concerned about as far as well construction. So, what's your static water level, and what's your drawdown? Because that determines drawdown determines where your pump is placed. You don't want to be. You want to be in the main body of water that you don't get air cavitation. There's a filter on the ground there. I'll talk about filtration in a minute, but with wells, especially new wells, EI, I know, you get a new well, you got to run it for days and days and days because there's sand in a new well. We didn't in this case, says, agricultural generally are always in a hurry, and we needed to get irrigated. So we set everything up and turned the pump on like morning. In the afternoon, we put our filter in, and we came back, and I put that in line and we'll plug it 10 minutes. So eventually, at the end of the day, we just left it off. A little larger application, and you'll see this with some of the potato back home. You're getting into deeper wells, larger volumes, like a proper deep well setup, turbine pump. The previous ones I showed you were all just submersible pumps. And then these, I know, not sure the depths you need to get back home, a couple hundred feet, and you're looking for 400 gallons a minute, you need a rugged pump. And just when we're talking with pumping rates and wells, I always show this too, just for comparison. Like here's some farms here. We have to report on our water use, PEI. Like we're talking 250, 280, 200 gallons a minute. One of the larger ones that I've been involved with, 700 gallons a minute. They run 2 to 3 months a year, and that's a single pump, single well. You look at the golf courses, stand-up golf and country clubs, you probably aware of that. They go 4 months a year at 250. City of Charlottetown, they run 12 months a year with 4 or 5 pumps out of the 1,200 gallons each. So, yeah, groundwater, some areas can be under a pretty high demand. I mentioned with wells, the only concern that I've seen is sediment from a well, but in a pond or a stream, there's a lot of organic material gets into those. So if you're doing irrigation, filtration is pretty important. I'm going to flip through these pretty quickly here, but there are different kinds of filters available, especially if you use drip irrigation. Like you're going to need filtration. Maybe not so much in a larger vegetable type operation. And just to show, like for drip irrigation, that's the orifice in your drip your drip tube. This is how much you should be filtering your water. And again, depending on flow rate and setup, there's some common ones, and I'll include a reference at the end for this equipment. Just we're getting close to the end here, Bree. So just proper pump type considerations. Obviously drip irrigation is low pressure, so you don't need real heavy infrastructure for that. Pressure tanks are critical. One thing when you're running the pipe, it could be for irrigation, it could be for anything really. Diameter of your pipe is so crucial. And that goes back to velocity. Anything over 5 feet per second of water in a pipe, over that, that's dangerous. So when you're pumping, 50 gallons a minute, like the irrigation stuff I showed you, 2 inches is fine. But if you get up towards like 300 gallons per minute, you need 6-inch pipe. The farm there with 700 gallon well, we were pumping 8-inch like for first part of the system. And it's much easier to water horizontally a properly sized pipe, pump it vertically. Okay, so that's about it. Just references that I use. I do have copies of this. This is the Farm Ponds Manual that was developed by the Planning Committee on Agricultural Engineering, early 90s. A few copies left, but I do have it digitally as well. So that's for free or myself. Get you a copy of that. And kind of off the record, why they get rid of that committee, I don't know, because it was very valuable. All those committees were good. Province of BC has very, very good design manuals. I use the one for trickle irrigation, sprinkler irrigation quite regularly. And I'm not promoting any certain distributor on purpose, but I deal with Vandenbush out of Delhi, Ontario, because I know the guy personally from PEI, salesman there, and they, quite good. So proper thing to do any of this work we talked about is do your homework. I think that's it.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me here today. My name is Etienne, Brice said it. I'm a research scientist with NS Accounts. So the presentation today, as you see, is all about from monitoring to management. So how local water data can actually support reliable farm water supplies. So a quick heads up here. The concept that I will be presenting here was originally developed for groundwater evaluation. So this is just kind of adapted to you guys, right? To be able to understand how this can be linked to what you are doing in terms of both quantity, so we're talking about levels and recharge, as well as quality. There we are talking about key indicators. So the next phase is definitely to expand this concept specifically to growers' needs. And this can make up, the project, subsequent project. So a water literate farm knows its sources, its limits, and the risk, obviously. So the point isn't collecting data for fun, it's actually using local information to track supply and demand, to spot trouble early, quite early enough, and trigger actions before water becomes a crisis. So if we can detect unusual conditions quite early, sooner, like, sort of variations in water level, critical variations in water level, slower well recovery, for example, or poor quality signals, then we can adjust irrigation. We can protect equipment, obviously, and we can keep operations stable. So monitoring is measuring, and management is deciding and acting. So with climate pressures that we see nowadays, the farm question is, how do we reduce surprise, I believe. And local data helps connect the dots. What the weather is doing, what your water source is doing, and obviously what your farm should do next. And the goal is simple: turn information into action that keep water reliable during peak demands. So now talking about climate pressures, rain is changing. We see that every day. Not just how much, but when and how intense. More intense rain can mean more runoff and less infiltration. So recharge doesn't happen the way we expect it to happen, especially for shallow groundwater. For farms, that can show up as ponds that refill unevenly, somehow connected to what Scott was presenting now, or wells that don't recover as quickly. This is why local tracking really matters. Like, if you have access to local data, so those data can actually be helpful. Your site may behave differently than the regional average. So droughts aren't only less rain, as we may think, right? So they are higher demand and reduced recharge at the same time. And during dry spells, pumping goes up, competing uses increase, and groundwater levels can drop faster and recover slower. For growers, like most of you, the key is early warning. So if your water level trend is declining earlier than usual, that is the moment to adjust irrigation strategy, not really when the pump starts sucking air. No, that means it's already worse. For coastal areas, sea level rise increases the risk of saltwater intrusion into fresh water aquifers. So even small changes can affect water usability for irrigation or water wash. The practical takeaway here, if you are near the coast, monitoring isn't just quantity. It's also about quality stability over time and being ready with response options if conditions shift. Hotter conditions mean more evaporation and more reliance on groundwater during dry spells. And if withdrawals increase over time, aquifers can be stressed. Lower water tables, less resilience, and higher risk of supply issues. And once again, for growers, we want to understand your well's personality. Say, stuff like how fast it drops, how it recovers, and what level becomes risky. That becomes the basis for triggers and the drought plan. So you understand that the solution here is really specific. It's on a case-by-case basis. So in our project, it's actually a project funded through the National Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada. One objective is to integrate a few essentials into a simple view: pond/well level, pumping, rainfall, and a small set of quality indicators where absolutely needed. And the benefit is practical. Anticipate low supply periods, avoid equipment failures, and schedule irrigation more efficient. And this isn't about complex analytics, really. It's about timely, local signals that help you growers stay ahead of problems. One other objective is translating shards into farm-ready thresholds, stuff like minimum pond level, allowable drawdown, expected recovery time, stuff like that, and then pairing each threshold with a clear action, like adjust scheduling, protect equipment, or protect the source of water, inspect storage ID, or switch plan. That's an option. And when everyone, like growers, advisors, decision makers, service providers, when they read the situation the same way, decisions become faster, calmer, and more consistent during stressful periods. So this here is where it gets real. We pilot with growers to learn what indicators matter most and how you want to display them. So you understand that, once again, the solution is kind of customized to each farm, I would say. So then we provide hands-on training, how to read hydrographs quickly, set triggers, and build a drought plan that matches your specific farm. And the loop is important. Your feedback improves the dashboard, and training builds confidence, so monitoring becomes consistently timely and in action. So the slide here is kind of our global approach, including 3 spheres, one being the sphere of control, another one being the sphere of influence, and the last one being the sphere of interest. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm just focusing on the first one, which is the sphere of control, where we actually put forward new and high quality evidence. We develop evidence data. We also build capacity for stakeholders, and of course, knowledge mobilization. This session is actually part of knowledge mobilization, like translating the knowledge to end users. And that's just the approach that we use to better kind of have you be part of the research study. So the one case example here. So what you see here is kind of an example of using spatial patterns to understand whether an issue is likely, local, or broader. And for farms, for example, that helps prioritize what to do next. Is it runoff, or wellhead protection, or storage hygiene? or is it regional aquifer chemistry? Spatial thinking can reduce guesswork and help target follow-ups, testing, where it lowers uncertainty the most. So, and in this case, you will see that the parameters that we were tracking were common parameters, in water quality assessment, like pH, coliforms, E. coli, manganese, and so on. And in this case, it's, a practical message here is patterns it helps us triage, basically. So once you know the ground condition or the groundwater condition in one specific area, you can actually predict certain things. So, so if an issue is local, we focus on protection, focus on maintenance or treatment. And if the issue is regional, we plan for source switching, for example, because we really can't control that at the farm level. We think of drought or withdrawal strategies or coordinated messaging. And the goal is, at the end of the day, just reliability, right? So fewer surprises, smarter follow-ups, and responses that match the real cause. So farms don't waste time or money chasing the wrong solutions, which is usually the case. So a few takeaways here today for growers. Know your source. Monitor supply and demand. And set simple triggers when to adjust irrigation. Protect quality or switch plants. For service providers or advisors, help select sensors, interpret trends, and optimize scheduling and storage. And for communities or government, share reliable data sets and practical guidance. If we align these roles, monitoring becomes the dependable farm practice here, not just the research project. So, thank you. And just to keep this grounded, when I'm not here in Nova Scotia doing research, I'm a grower myself. And you can see that there. You can see me holding plantain there. And so this slide basically shows me in action, right? I mean, and it also shows a typical sort of family meeting in the woods around the wood fire. You see the wood fire there, and that fire warms people. And it also helps repel insects. So everyone can talk, plan, and make decisions, right? And that's the spirit of this work as well. Practical tools that serve real farm needs. Thank you.
So as she said, my name is Dave Wolfen. Just to give you well, first, I'm probably going to talk for about 10 minutes. Then Philippe, who is on Zoom, probably talk for about 10 minutes, and then you can take 10 minutes of questions. That seems like the smart thing to do. I'll give 90 seconds on who I am. Basically, I grew up in New Brunswick. I started digging the dirt before I could walk. We grew all our vegetables growing up, and I had hippies for parents, so that was the vibe. And I kind of grew into a passion, and I'm unknowingly was an entrepreneur, and so everything I grew, I wanted to sell. In my 20s, I had a grocery store, farm together. They employed about 80 people. That was an adventure. There's a long story there, but I burnt out. I went traveling, decided that I wanted to stay connected to agriculture, and I kind of fell into agricultural supply. So where I positioned myself, I moved to Halifax in 2019, and where I positioned myself basically to support primarily small, medium, and large fruit, vegetable, big fruit, vegetable farms. I focus pretty heavily on things that are season extension. That also includes irrigation, which we also use irrigation for season extension, but sell a lot of structures, ag plastics, and my whole shtick is that on economics, so that anyone, I'm probably the only company in Atlantic Canada that invokes some mixed fruit vegetable agriculture, doesn't tie itself to like one company. I have lots of suppliers. I'm a distributor for some, agent for some. I have lots of my own inventory, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, that's who I am. Hordan has asked me to come and talk about drip irrigation, which at first was a chuckle for me because irrigation is the one thing that I feel like I have at least out of college. It's stuff that I sell. Like, can I talk about greenhouses? But just to show of hands, who here is currently using drip irrigation for something on their farm? Okay, so it should be. So drip. Oh, what is that? Drip irrigation is it was developed in the desert, absence of water, and it's kind of amazing that this stuff didn't exist, 70 years ago, and now it does. But basically, there's two directions you can go. There's kind of three directions you can go, but we'll start with two directions you can go with drip irrigation. The whole idea of drip irrigation is, one, you want least water possible. Two, a lot of plants like wet feet, not wet tops. So you're going to get much lower disease pressure, fungal pressure if you use drip irrigation. Also, everything's cheaper. I'm skipping ahead, but if you were to do this field in drip irrigation, pump that you'd need would be like a third of the size. So you spend less money on a pump, you're moving less water. So there's two routes you can take for drip. I think the samples are being passed around. And basically, you've got drip tape and you've got drip line. Drip tape goes from 5 mil thick to 15 mil thick. Generally, you can get thicker. There's a company in the States that makes 25 mil thick that I've heard some people using, but typically, like for example, from Withdrawal, you use 5 mil, 15 mil. The difference is the thickness, the wall thickness. Farms like Elbridge, who most of you know, use 5 mil for their sweet potatoes because after you cover it with the plastic, you're not going to rip that up when you harvest and save it for drip. It's not going to work out. So use the cheapest, thinnest stuff, throw it out here. Time to have a hard time with plastic waste, but if you compare it to a lot of the other plastic culture that we do, one roll of drip tape that's this big, it's 10,000 feet long, serves its purpose. Technically, you can recycle it. You don't be doing it. And then all the way up to 15 mil, a lot of strawberry producers use 15 mil drip tape because you're using it for 2, sometimes 3 years, because you're leaving it in place. And as long as the rodents don't shoot holes through it, then it's good for multiple years. It costs about, costs more than the 5 mil stuff, but you're getting more years out of it. Then you've got drip line. In terms of spacing, anywhere from 4-inch typically to, believe it correctly, but I think up to 18-inch or 16-inch spacing. I think you can get 24-inch, but usually the 24-inch is for a drip line, which I'll get to in a moment. There's a lot to think about there. There's also like different hole sizes. You have to think about the flow. So this is where the lead comes in. Every time somebody comes to me asking for some irrigation, I usually draw something like this, and I figure out elevations. So I feel elevations and distances and how much pipe you'll need, and all that. That's the lead development decision. The lead is probably in the top 1 or 2 in terms of irrigation experts in Canada. So it's a real privilege to work with them. But I try to gather all the information from people trying to solve the problems, and then I bring it to him or one of the other experts that work with him at Withdrawal. So that's drip tape. Drip line is often used for nurseries or berry farms like blueberries or raspberries, or even apples. That now that we're planting a lot of apples or other fruit trees pretty close together, we're using drip line, which is much thicker. It's 75 mil thick, and it'll last for 10, 15 years. And so then you can plant it with your raspberries, plant it, or you can put it in. You're never taking it out by the time that all grows in together. But it costs a lot more. Just today, I was sorting out just where I was here. I was re-palletizing 50 rolls for a customer who needed it for raspberries. There's the third kind of angle of drip irrigation. I'm not sure why to anyone here, but you have weighted drippers. So for hanging baskets, you can also use it like in this field, we're actually going to use micro sprinklers, which I would call drip irrigation, but it's close because it's also low water usage. And but you could also use weighted drippers in a situation like this, depending on the crop. This is 8 acres. So yeah, this is what I prepare for. You can see cherries and peaches and apples. And this one is a customer that's planning to remove apples and plant strawberries. I'm pretty much up at my 10 minutes now. Doesn't take very long. Don't know what I've left out but we can get that with questions. So maybe Philippe can talk about some of the more technical stuff.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're doing well. I'm very sorry to be not present with you today, but thank you for the invitation. It's pretty cool to be able to present you some technical difference between drip systems options. It will give you a main idea of what is your needs. The only thing you have to know is every farm has its own needs, but there are some generics path that we can start something. First of all, thanks to Dave for his presentation. Couple of topics I'm going to pass through pretty quickly because it's a kind of crossover presentation. But just to present myself, I'm Philippe Michael, working in the industry since 25 years, working for Dubois for the last 3 years, and I was in the past I was a certified agricultural irrigation specialist from the Irrigation Association in the US. So it was between 2013 and 2022. So I'm just going to present you roughly the technical difference between different systems options. So generally, there's 5 major technical difference. So there's the general thickness. We're going to pass through pretty quickly since Dave just explained it to you, but I'm going to go pretty quickly. You have to keep in mind that there's some dripper styles difference. There's the non-compensated drippers and the pressure compensated drippers that I'm going to show you a little bit later. There's some difference between flows and spacing. And I'm going to give you a table also about the average length of run depending on the setup that you have. So roughly tape or tube. Generally, as Dave explained, I'm going to pass pretty quickly on that one. But you know, on the flow and on the performance, it is the same. This is the same thing. A tape at 12-inch spacing outlet and a tube at 12-inch spacing outlet, I mean, is the same thing. It's a hole every 12-inch. The difference is going to be the thickness of the material. So as Dave explained, thinner you will be, it will be mostly for quick crop or annual crop that you will have a full rotation in your field, and thicker you will choose is going to be for a long-term crop, like for 15 milli for 3-season strawberries or 5-season raspberries. And on tubing, we're going generally in bushes and orchard and nursery, as you mentioned. So there's generally three different dripper style that will be offered to you. First of all, you will have the turbulence flow. That is mostly the cheapest option on the market. Okay, it's only in tape. Normally, I cannot show you with a video or with my hands, but technically, it's a sheet of plastic that they put a maze, a calibrated band turbulence flow in it, and they just fold it and glue it. You can probably see it on the pictures, but it's generally a band that is glued on the top of the drip tape, and it's with a laser cut outlet every 8-inch, 12-inch, 18-inch, 24-inch, depending on your requests. Normally, the flow is calculated on a 100-foot length base. It's on gallons per minute, depending on the flow pack. This kind of product cannot support a hill of more than 1.5%. So just when we are talking about a turbulent style calibrated band drippers, I mean, it's for flatland. So that's why it's pretty cheap. It's for easy installation, easy using flatland, roughly. And normally, because of the kind of flow path, it requires a higher filtration to prevent clogging. So if we are talking to you about Thoro Aquatrax, Rivalus T-tape, Irritec One tape, we got our own brand also called Aquamaze. Just let you know, this is really the cheapest option and the basic stuff. On the other side, we still have, we call that, it's a block emitter. So instead of a band, a calibrated band, it is a block emitters. This is the standard on the market. It's an emitter that it's punched inside the drip tube or the drip tape. So it can be used in the tube or a tape. And instead, since it's an independent block emitters, the flow is calculated by emitters. So you need to make it, depending if it's an 8-inch, 12-inch, you calculate the number of emitters, and then you're able to calculate your flow. Normally, this kind of drippers can support 3% of hill or bumpy rides. So if you have a bumpy field, we recommend you to go with a block emitters, since it's gonna work much better than a turbulence calibrated band emitter style, dripper style. So for suppliers and product, if we were talking about Netafim Streamline, Netafim DripNet PC, Rivalus D900, or our home brand, the Dubois Nebula, this is standard block emitters drip tape or drip tubing, depending on your selection for thickness. And finally, we also have some external emitters. This is also pretty standard on the market, but it's mostly when you have some unusual drip spacing. You can insert on the blank tubing. You can insert manually a dripper where you want. It can be directly at the bottom of your crop. It can be spaced in the middle of 2 trees, whatever. I mean, it's up to you. You can install it the right way. It is pretty standard. It's the old-fashioned way to have some drip irrigation. And normally it is 100% pressure compensated flow. I'm going to get that through in a couple of slides. But just to let you know that it's another option. So you need a blank tubing, so a thick one, a long-term one. And And the only thing you have to do is to punch on the outside the dripper that you want. So when we are talking about Netafim drippers, Rivolus drippers, Meteor drippers, it is all the same thing at the same point. It's just coming from other suppliers. So I just talk about what is a standard flow chart between pressure compensated. I just want to when we're talking about standard, it's like just having a hole in your drip tape or a drip tube. So more you have pressure in your drip system, more flow will go out of the hole. Okay, that's the basic thing you have to understand. So mostly, you can see the graph right there. It shows different flow drippers, but technically you can see that closer you are of 0 psi, there's no flow, and higher is the inlet pressure, the higher is the flow. So there's always a difference of flow depending on the pressure. So when you're on a flatland, there is no problem because pressure is going to be pretty stable for a certain amount of length. But if you have a downhill or an uphill situation, you will see a lot of difference between the flow at the bottom of the hill and the flow at the top of the hill. So that is the basic one, which is a standard flow variation graph, sorry. And this is what we call pressure compensating. As you can see, probably between 0 and 6 psi, there is the rise through the pressure regulating point. So as soon you hit 6 psi of pressure in your system, then whatever the flow is going to be the same at all the time. So mostly when you have pretty hilly situation to prevent flow difference, and if you apply a lot of fertilizer and you want to have the same amount of fertilizer per dripper, that is the kind of dripper that can help you to have the right solution. Also, there are some drippers flows and spacing difference. So technically, the flow option that we got, we're talking about extra low flow or low flow. Normally, it's when you have a very light or a very heavy soil. So when it's very light or very heavy, we're using the same. When you're very light, it means that there's a lot, you have to go pretty slowly to let the water use the capillary effect into the soil. And if you're on a very heavy clay soil, we don't want to spread a lot of water pretty quickly because we don't want the soil to dry like cement. So we're going pretty slowly. Of course, you can do some the longer of the length of run is the length of run is longer. And if you have a low, if you have a low availability of water, this is a good option also to be able to give water to your plant. Medium flow is general. Every general soil, common crop, row crop, it's medium flow. And when we are going high flow, mostly it's for germination, pulsing irrigation, or if you have some small root zones. So that is on flow selection on your drip tape or drip tubing. After that, there is the spacing. So as I mentioned previously, the dripper flow, it's mostly depending on soil. And the dripper spacing, it's depending on crop, generally. So generally on 8-inch spacing, everything about root vegetables, leaf vegetables like lettuce, spinach, that kind of stuff. Small fruit, mostly strawberries. Sorry, I forgot a W. It will be an 8-inch spacing. 12-inch spacing is pretty common. So when we are talking about flower vegetable, like cucumbers, peppers, that kind of stuff, eggplants is 12-inch spacing. 18-inch spacing is mostly for bushes, blueberries, and we can go up through 24-inch for orchard. And general table for your knowledge. So depending on the more you have drippers on the line, shorter is going to be your length of run. It sounds pretty logical. So roughly, when you have some standard is 5/8 ID tape or tube. So if you want to have a kind of pretty good uniformity, for 8-inch spacing, it starts at 465 foot length of run. And for 24-inch with low flow, you can go through 1,300 feet. And if you're going with some bigger ID drip tape, drip tube, then depending if you want to go through a 24-inch spacing, you can mostly cover a half a mile with one line of drip tape or drip tubing. So there's always a solution and there's always option. It's just to show you roughly how it works. Questions?
And I was gonna add that some of that could be overwhelming if you don't know where to start, if you're new to it. So that's the area that I typically help with, is I get on Google Video with you and I screen share with you and then I draw what you tell me you want, and then I go to Philippe and figure it out. Come back to you with different options, so it's not so overwhelming. Yeah, any questions? Not necessarily just about drip irrigation. You could ask questions about anything else. Personally, I haven't seen it used on rhubarb. Would it work on rhubarb? Absolutely. That was one of my first crops when I was like 6. I could still crawl through the leaves under the canopy, but I used to just pick rhubarb, bring it and sell it for 15 cents a pound. But absolutely. So one thing I missed that Philippe did touch on was fertigation. Another really big reason for drip irrigation, apart from low water. I mean, in California, Imperial Valley, they couldn't survive without drip irrigation. They don't, the Colorado River just, there's not enough water. So when he's talking about doing like half-mile long runs of drip tape, that's where that's happening especially. But you're trying to get nutrition to your crops. Being able to fertigate through drip tape is very effective without wasting or without applying the nutrition underneath it. But yes, absolutely. Any other questions? So we're using HDPE now a lot. It's better pipe, especially for burying. The concern, Billy can probably talk more about this, but the concern about burying pipe is really about having to fix problems and access. The one that I showed you that I just put those sample drawings up just so I could show you what my process is when someone comes to me looking for help. But that field with the cherries and the peaches and the apples that I showed you, that's going to be all buried HDPE because the tractor has to drive up and down. And so to me, that's the big advantage is accessibility. Lay flat is very flexible to move around, to definitely clean out, to repair things. But any thoughts on burying versus lay flat, burying HDPE versus lay flat? Also, can you talk about the benefits of HDPE compared to PVC?
Technically, when you're just going through PVC, because it's a 20 foot straight bar, is technically has to be buried under the frost line. Because, when the soil is moving, I know where there's a lot of people that are burying it in pretty coarse sand, so it's not pretty hard on the hard pipe. But now, HDPE pricing is lower than PVC. You can bury it, at least 12-inch down, and everything is pretty cool. You can use some standard couplers also to fix them. And all you have to do is to drain it at the end of the year, and it's going to move pretty quickly. So technically for the HDPE, it's same kind of pressure resistance. It's more easy to find some couplers to repair. You're not in the obligation to put it under the frost line if you buried it. And that's mostly it. Yeah, and it's cheaper than PVC right now.
And the obstacle is the HDPE maxes out at 3-inch. So after 3-inch, you have to go to PVC, the 20 foot, sometimes 30 foot lengths. But like, for example, with that 8-acre orchard that I showed you, in some place, well, we were discussing, it's basically the same price to run 2 lengths of 3-inch as it is to run 1 length of 4-inch. And so in the end, we only needed to, for that specific orchard, we only needed to run 1 length of 3-inch because we decided that every single line wasn't going to be run all at the same time. So that saved a lot, but yeah, does that answer your question?
And lifespan wise, then should I go back issue matching up the lifespan of the high edge of the orchard? 25
Absolutely, yeah. Like you did the question. Oh yeah, good call. The question was about whether it's worth burying pipe versus slate flat above the ground. The pros and cons. What was the last thing you said? You're more likely to damage something before the pipe goes bad. Any other questions?
Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Paul Jones. I'm with Nova Scotia Environment Climate Change. I'm a manager in the Yarmouth office. A little about me is I actually, in the mid-90s, I went to the agricultural college. I had a dream of being a farmer, and I took ag back there. Tried to be a farmer for a bit, and then my path skewed off, and then I kind of swung back and then skewed off again, and then I'm close to being with water and stuff like that, but I don't. I live in town now, and I do have chickens, but that's about it. With the theme on irrigation, thought it was appropriate to talk about water withdrawals. I will admit that I prepared 45 slides for this 20-minute presentation, which I will not go through all of them. So as I've been told, I have 20 or 30 minutes to talk to you. I have business cards, so at the end of this, please feel free to contact me at any time with any questions that you have or any point. I believe my audience is horticulture and agriculture. Is that correct? The first question I'll give to you is, anybody have a water withdrawal approval with Nova Scotia Environment Climate Change? There you go. I've talked to a lot of agriculture. I've done a lot of presentations for agriculture, and some reason people are scared of us. So don't be, we're here to help you. Tell us stuff, and we're not going to come screaming out there and charging you with anything. Just for my little disclaimer, okay? So you ask a question, I'm not coming after you, taking your name, whatnot. So just in case you see something. Seems to be a common theme. Good news for people who have a water withdrawal, that we're no longer, as of last month, requiring annual reports. So you should have received a letter from us just within the last couple of weeks stating that there's no longer a requirement for annual reports unless we ask for it. Still keep your data and information, but you don't have to submit yearly reports to us any longer. So there's a positive note. All right. I'm Paul Jones. This is a picture when I was an inspector, and my dog had to take him out once in a while to the thing. So yeah, so the objective is this: I'm going to give you an overview of the water withdrawal, what a water course is, and why we actually regulate these, part of the regulations, and also the approval process. But like I said, I have 45 slides, and I want to give you guys some time for questions. So, okay. Water in Nova Scotia. Water course, this is a definition in the Environment Act and our regulations. It's what a water course is. It's the bed shore of every river, stream, lake, creek, pond, spring, lagoon, or other natural body of water, and the water within, with the jurisdiction of Nova Scotia, whether it contains water or not. That's fun. And also all ground. So this is where the water withdrawal comes from, is that if you're taking it from a brook, pond, lake, or whatever, still us. And if you're taking it from a well, a drilled well, still us. Not to spend too much time. Water course. We regulate everything from the bank, so the floodplain bank, the natural water, the bed, So this is the bank, ordinary watermark in the bed and also flow. So if you change the flow of a water course, then we regulate that. Hydrology, I'm not going to get into that too much. Groundwater quantity. So we do have maps and regulation of where groundwater. You'll see the red part, which Kings County has majority of the water withdrawals in the province, where most of the water is used for agricultural purposes. Climate change. So as we all know, things are getting drier. People are needing more water for the crops. So there's becoming more stress on the water reserves. So that's something we account for as well. Approach to water allocation. I'm going to miss that. Okay, Environment Act and regulations. So made under Section 66 of the Environment Act, anything designates. So this is our activities designation. So basically in our activities designation regulations, there are triggers that actually trigger people to have an approval with us, things that we actually will regulate. This is fun. This is a guy who's withdrawing water from a water course. He dug a hole, put a bucket, had a little pump in that he was doing his thing. The trick here is he did alter the water course and he was withdrawing water. Just a fun picture. So the activity designation regulations, using or altering a water course, which I've already talked about. But what you'd be more entailed to trigger something with a water withdrawal is this 23,000 liters per day. So if you're withdrawing 23,000 liters, irrigating a field, most times for agriculture, it's irrigation, like large scale irrigation where they're doing irrigating guns or something like that. You're withdrawing that much water, putting on your fields, 23,000 liters. A little unknown is that if you're storing more than 25,000 liters per meter squared, 20,000 liters per meter squared, then you are required storage approval. So a lot of these people who have ponds and stuff may have a trigger for a storage approval. And if you're damming or constructing a dam in a water course or pond, it would require approval with us too. Am I talking too fast? I do have 45 slides.
So, the storing water volume over 25,000 cube. So you're better off to do 2 ponds instead of 1.
If you're trying to avoid us, but sometimes we will look at accumulating storage on a property as well. So there are some large area people who are storing a lot of volume, but yeah, we typically look at the individual pond, not if you dug a whole bunch of ponds around. But the thing with the ponds is they can't interact with the water table. So when you start interacting with the water table, speed becomes a little bit more tricky because now you're altering the flow of a water course. The water course is groundwater as well.
So you need like supplement. That's pretty good.
Yeah, if you're digging a well that's supplementing the pond, we do have instances where I've seen where they have a well and then they'll fill the pond with a drilled well. So if you start pulling more than 23,000 liters out of that well, you trigger a water withdrawal. Great questions. Thanks, Donald. Activity, altering the flow following. So again, when you're withdrawing water from a water course itself, like a brook, it's the alteration of a water course, a water resource, or a wetland. So any of those are designated, you need approval. So sometimes I see people like, oh, look, that looks wet. I want to dig a pond there, but you're actually altering a wetland to get your water resource. You will need an approval for that alteration of the wetland and potentially the withdrawal or storage of that water. So be careful when you see something wet that looks really attractive that you want to make it as a resource where you're pulling some water from for irrigation. Make sure it's not a wetland first, because that's when you become under jurisdiction of altering a wetland. I always like throwing this into my presentations. There is the Farm Protection Act. but it doesn't protect you from altering water courses, wetlands, and in the withdrawal of water. You do have the right to clear, drain, level, irrigation, and cultivating land, but you still have to be cognizant of wetlands, that you're not draining those and altering those. Or if there's this historical ditch that you've had on your property, it's actually a water course, because the definition says it doesn't have to have water in it or not, but if it's a historical water course, you still may fall under our regulations. I do love this though. The water withdrawal. So this is just a couple pictures of sites I've actually been on. If it's your site, I'm not telling you who it is, so please you can just say. All right. So again, when approval is required, is if you're withdrawing more than 23,000 liters of water per day from any source or surface water or groundwater. So it could be a streamer or a drilled well. Kind of already went over when approval is required. So I'll skip that. When you don't need an approval is a non-resource use of water from the same water course, total period, 2 weeks. So if you're just withdrawing for 2 weeks, so to drought, you need 2 weeks of water, or for under, just get the water on there. Emergency purposes, then you don't need to have a full approval with us. It's when you start constantly pulling that water out. And then there's drip irrigation, depending on the flow and such, don't need to have an approval if you're not withdrawing the 23,000 liters. So I've been at a site where a guy had a jet pump. It's only half horsepower, but he's irrigating his whole entire field with it. Drip irrigation, don't need a withdrawal with us with that. You'd have to have that 23,000 liters per day. Okay, so this section is about the water withdrawal itself for in water courses. It's really important to make sure that you're not pulling any fish. EFO doesn't like that. So screens are important. Intake screens in the volume water remaining. So a lot of times we don't want you to take more than 75% of the water out of it. So you still have to let the flow of the brook stay sort of natural. So if you have a particular flow coming in, you can withdraw to a point of about 75% of letting the flow go out. So you don't want you to drain a water course dry, even though you have approval to withdraw 23,000 liters per day. 6 rings, the DFO. This is the water storage part, dams and irrigation ponds or large tools. So yeah, so when approval is required, again, the 25,000 liters. Sorry, repeating myself. That's a nice picture. When approvals are not required, water course, wetland, okay, sorry. When approval is required. So this is a fun picture where a person put a crock well right in the middle of a brook. That is not allowed. And then altering a wetland, as I mentioned before, if you think it's wet a lot of time of the year, you're looking for water and you want to dig a hole, ask us first. It's not that you can't, just there might be an approval needed. The approval, I got drip irrigation picture. The approval process is basically an application process. So if you believe that you're going to be withdrawing 23,000 liters, or if you're altering a wetland or water course, go online, an application form to submit. We're always willing to help. Please call us before digging. Even though some people are skeptical of that we are out to get you, but we're not. We'd rather have you help and give you advice than get to see you afterwards. So this is the approval process. So an application comes in, it's reviewed. That if there's some information that's missing, we'll reach out to you. And then the application decision, the manager, myself will approve, get your approval, and then that approval is to be kept with you at all times, and then be cognizant of the expiry date on it. But one of the terms and conditions, like I mentioned just recently, it's been removed, that you don't have to submit an annual report to us. Yeah, so the supporting information that is required for a water withdrawal, the volume of the water, the location of the well or where it's for a water course, GPS, time of year, and any other uses. Okay, supporting information, surface water. So yeah, there's low risk activities or high risk activities. All the information that we require. Sometimes one of the biggest factors that comes in is that request of a hydrogeologist might be needed, but you should ask us first because it's a low risk impact that your knowledge as the property owner or the farmer themselves or the horticulturalist, you can probably give us a lot of information that we need, so you don't need to put the expense out as a hydrogeologist. But if it's a high risk farm, then we might need you, and depending on the water withdrawal, might require you to have a hydrogeological assessment. I think I said that right. So the groundwater is. So yes, the application. If you require assistance, again, I like to preach this, please contact us. True decision after the approval. So after the approval, you are required to keep records on how much water you're withdrawing. So we don't always require a flow meter installed. If you know your pump volume and the amount of water that's coming out and size of your hose, the pump, then you can calculate that, and that's acceptable. But if there's we have some question on your accuracy, then we might require you to put a flow meter in, but it's not always required. Inspectors will come out, they'll contact you, they'll come out to do audits. And on the audit, we want to see the location, we want to see the well or the water course that you're pulling it from. We'll also want to see your records. So the inspector will want to come and see the records. So if you have a crop that's typically on a field that you irrigate, but this year you don't have a crop that you need to irrigate, just tell us that, record that in your ledger or your notes, that there's no irrigation this year due to crop. Yeah, so and then the compliance part is that you haven't abided by the terms and conditions of your approval, which are outlined in the approval, then there's potentially compliance. Again, I'm preaching opportunity to work together. I know I've said this multiple times, but if I repeat myself, you might believe me. We want to work with you. There. Any questions for me regarding that? Yes.
So we went through the groundwater withdrawal process 4 years ago, and it was quite a big cost, like to hire a hydrologist. I'm just wondering if there's any like compensation or like we saw what the cost. It cost us about $10,000 just for that. If that was like an additional type grant for. I think it was the test, water test that we have to do.
The water test.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if you can speak on that.
The question was, there is a significant cost for the hydrogeology specialists to come and do the assessment for the water, the well. The question was, is there assistance? Unfortunately, no, from us. Agriculture had some in the past, but the current climate cuts and things. There's no help with that. What I can say is if there's historical data, like you already have it, and you're applying for the same area, you probably use that same data if you're drilling another well, or if it's a low risk activity that you're looking for, then we can find that. But unfortunately, yeah, I don't know your situation, what the size of it was. Yeah, it would require some sort of assessment. The tests for quality, was it?
It was water volume.
Water volume. So, yeah. So with the weather and stuff, if you're only, withdrawing, it's a variance. So you would actually just put an application for a variance for your approval. So if you're looking to expand your window, just there's in the application, there's a request for a variance or if you're getting a renewal or something, you can put that in there. The variance is the process for that is just a letter to us. So you can send an email or a letter, submit that you are requesting to have your pumping season increased, then we would process that. Yeah, there's no application for it during the year, but if you just send us a letter, we call the variance to your approval, we could definitely look at that. And if it's something that is short term, like you said, okay, like this is crazy summer, it's really dry, or season's going longer, we can give you a letter basically allowing you to do that without actually adjusting your approval.
The approval's only good for 1 year?
No, the approval's good for 10 years now.
It's not by what you were saying here.
Yeah, but they're depending on the approval itself, and they have limitations on when you can actually do the irrigation. So it would be in that. And also, if your volumes have changed, agriculture doesn't have a fee for the amount of water they use, but other municipalities and stuff have to pay a fee. So they're conscious of how much water they use. If you use less than your allotted, then that fee would change. But if you're using more water, let us know. If you're using less water, let us know. You can adjust your approval to reflect that. So for occasionally using it, so the question was, what's the definition between occasional and full-time? So if I understand you, if you only have to do it for like a couple of weeks, then you don't have to have an approval process. If you're withdrawing from a brook for a couple of weeks just to modify it, so I think it's 2 weeks. If you're doing anything more than that, or you're having larger volumes, then you would require an approval for that draw.
Didn't your slide say that that was not reoccurring and it said agriculture was not exempt? So if I was using it for cross protection for 2 weeks of the year, I would still need a permit. Because it will be reoccurring. I'm going to do it next year. I'm going to do the year after.
Yeah, so it's something that you're continuously doing.
Yeah.
So it's not a one-off.
His answer.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, if it's not a one-off, then
That's like a one-off.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is a one-off.
Hard to burn.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. Or if like you had to spray your field because of that, of frost or whatnot. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes.
So if I were to drill a well on my property that I believe my residential plus my farm, less than 23,000 liters.
So all you'd have to do is follow the well regulations, the well installation regulations, which is all the well drillers themselves. So as long as you don't peak that 23,000 liters, if you stay under 23,000 liters, you're not required, which drip irrigation would come into that. So you're not blasting a gun through a field, losing all your water and stuff like that through evaporation, things like that. You're dripping, if you're under that 23,000 liters. Not trying to sell drip irrigation here for the gentleman, but that would be certainly a benefit. So the question was is that if you the storage of 25,000 cubic meters of water, could you have multiple ponds? And that is yes. Yeah. So again, it's at 23,000 liters. So if you're pumping, if it's really dry because your ponds have gone dry, there is supplement. Some people do supplement with a drilled well. Sorry, a drilled well. Then as long as you're not all over that 23,000 liters, you're fine. But it doesn't take much to get to that 23,000 liter pond, especially if you're doing it each day. This definition of the water course?
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't see the word ditch in there.
No, we don't regulate ditches.
But that's part of the problem with that farmers have had Department of Environment climate change for the last few years. Somebody says that they're altered in water course, and it's a ditch that's been there since like 1960, but dug out 3 or 4 times over the last 5 or 6 decades. And your inspector comes in and calls it a water course. It's really been a man-made ditch. So is there any kind of, does the Department of Environment have maps saying, well, this is a water course in your area, this is not? And is it, like, should farmers be keeping a logbook saying this is a ditch? We redug it in 1995, we redug it again in 2005, and then 2025, right? It's just, there's a lot of farmers that are getting in a little bit of trouble because, they're doing regular maintenance to the ditches, and it's getting called the water course, and it's not really the water course.
So the question was, one's a ditch, one's a water course.
Basically, yes.
For the people online. It was a little bit longer than that, but the essence of it was that. So in my world, the inspector has the authority to deem whatever they believe is a water course a water. Or they have that authority on the environment. But it does come with knowledge, historical knowledge, mapping and stuff. Yes, we do have mapping. It's not accurate. So the issue is that historically, I love my farmers, is that they ditched something because water was running through it at some point in time, or it was wet. So over a long period of time, that wet spot water course has turned into a ditch, especially anything flowing from North Mountain to the valley. And there's a long straight line. Probably historically, I just put it out there. That probably was a water course that was deepened to remove more water from the fields and stuff. So that's when it becomes a question, is that, was it actually a ditch, or was it a water course that was ditched to move water better across their property? So the conflict comes in, but the question in the conversation comes in, if that is actually a water course, historically, heavily modified from farming activity, or was it actually a ditch across the field? Yes, we do have questions on that, and recently we've had some questions regarding that of an old water course that was always a big ditch, or by the farmer historically through generations being maintained. And then they come across an issue with us. Now we're saying it's water course, they say it's ditch. Now their property's flooding because of growth and stuff like that. There is an application process of going through and seeing that, and then having that approved for ditching. But it has to be a question and a conversation, an application process, and then, historical knowledge. Yes, we will talk, but and we've actually been on sites together where we always was a water course. It was just heavily modified by agriculture, and even as maintained. But if you do have water storage, that used to be an irrigation pond that we dug historically, and then something started feeding into it and turning into what looks like a water course, but it's been heavily maintained by agriculture. It's still an irrigation pond. So we're not going to doubt that irrigation pond that was dug and maintained. That's fine. But once it stops being maintained, it starts to naturalize, then you're into water course alteration.
How many people in here know Terraviata? I always ask this question. How many of you have been to one of our firms? Oh, wow, more than I thought. Okay, so some of this stuff is going to look a little familiar to you, but I'm going to try and focus on the automation side of our business, which is one of the newer things that we did in the last few years. Terraviata Farms goes back to 1998. We started with the idea to build a farm from nothing. It was not an existing farm at that point. Since that, we've expanded, and we now have 3 actual farms. We started with 1 farm. 2019, we bought 2 more farms. So we have 3 farms. Heckman's Island's our original farm. It was built with a full environmental assessment before it started. Greenfield site on a peat bog. The only one at that time that was built on a peat bog, fresh in Nova Scotia. There's some that are 100 years old that were on peat bogs. And the other 2 farms we have are in the valley, Aylesford and Tremont, where the ground is much sandier. And cranberries, as you probably all know, are a wetland plant. So we are actually farming a wetland plant. In order to do that, the plants kind of like it to look a lot like a wetland. So there are certain parts of Nova Scotia that historically have grown cranberries. You go back to the 1950s. Nova Scotia was the world leader in cranberries. We produced more cranberries here than they did in the United States. Then there was a big scare in 1959. related to pesticides that was proven to be false later, but it scared everybody off cranberries. And all the people in the states came together and they started what became Ocean Spray. They worked together and formed a cooperative to work together in the industry. All the guys in Nova Scotia said, I'm going to put my neighbor out of business. And they worked hard to be competitive with each other. And in the end, they ended up losing their farms. And so there's a lot of old historic history in Nova Scotia for cranberries. And I thought it was a very interesting place for us to grow cranberries. So we decided to do that. Our business has grown a lot since 1998. We now have 2 processing facilities. We make the cranberry and the apple juice for the hospitals. Hopefully none of you have seen it up close personally lately. But that's our latest client that we picked up. We also sell in the grocery stores and we sell cranberries all around the world. Our facility in Heckman's Island is where we make the juice. And our facility in Sackville, New Brunswick is where we do the frozen cranberries. I don't know if any of you have been across the marsh, but it's the big cube there. That's our facility. That's what we use to store frozen product. And only 20% of it is our product. 80% of it is other people's. So we store everything that's frozen on pallets. So that's a little of our history. I want to talk a little bit about cranberries and water. Cranberries are, because they're a wetland plant, what farmers do is they emulate the wetland's natural cycle growing the cranberries. So it's a year-round cycle. It's actually an 18-month cycle for cranberries to grow. The flowers for this year's crop coming up were set as buds in August last year. So we have to look after those buds all the way from August, all the way through to the next August, the next fall when they're harvested. So I'm going to start my little thing about water here in the spring, about when water becomes important to us. So in the winter, the cranberries are flooded to protect them from freeze drying essentially. And it's the same as a good producing natural bog naturally floods when we intentionally flood ours. In the spring, we let that water off, and you can see in this photo, one of our guys is putting the sprinkler heads in the field. Yes, that is all high density pipe buried underneath the ground. All the laterals, all the main lines of the farm are all, and every one of our farms are all high density poly. It works really well in a site where we have a lot of freeze-thaw and a lot of activity on the ground. With the sprinklers, we also added, 10 years ago, we started doing this. Now each of the farms has this. The brand of system we use is called Hortone. So if you want to learn more about that and context for this, if anybody's interested in this, you can talk to me more about the specifics of the Hortone system at any time. You can see in the field there's a little white tower with a box at the top. And this is all electronic stuff. It's kind of cool stuff. There's a cell phone modem in there. And so it communicates with the mothership in Quebec all year long, all growing season, every so many minutes. And it will communicate, this one will communicate 4 things. We have a few in the valley and it'll communicate a little bit on the weather as well. So the weather station. This one is strictly the growing conditions in the field. So there's sensors in the ground, there's 2 of them, and they're monitoring the tension, the soil tension. So they're keeping track of how wet the ground is. So our guys can go online and look and see is it trending to get drier, is it trending to get wetter, how much last night's rain helped with our water situation or not. It's all, this thing communicates every 10 minutes or so. It's a lot of data. There's an app on your phone, so you can look on your phone and see this stuff on the computer. It also monitors the temperatures. It monitors the exposed temperature, so the air temperature above the line. So we use that for our frost protection. I'll show you that in a second. And it monitors, and there's a little white box at the base of the stand there. That's the shielded temperature. So that will monitor the canopy temperature in the middle of summer when things are getting pretty hot, whether we want to irrigate the cool plants down at all. So that's the data collection side of this. What's not shown in that system is that there's an automation component of the system that's hooked up to the each of our farms. And so the system itself can be programmed by our farm manager or by our other guy that's good at this. I'm not so good at that. And they can see, set the irrigation to work under different parameters. So one of the obvious ones is frost protection. You can see the ice formed on the plants there. What we do to protect the plants from freezing and damaging buds in the spring is we run the sprinkler system. And you can make ice all night long. And so as the ice is freezing, the plant stays the latent heat diffusion of the water freezing keeps the plant from getting so cold that the bud will get damaged. It's a very common practice in cranberries, very important practice. If you don't do this, sort of like a grapevine, the plant will start to grow, and it'll warm day, it'll expand, and the bud will get big and it'll get soft. Then a cold night will come, and it's so cold that it actually freezes the tissues and splits the cells, and the bud dies. So by frost protecting, we avoid that. That's very important for the cranberry industry. When with our guys, they can program, do I want it to start at 1 degree? Do I want it to start at -1? Do I want to start at -4? You know, we can change the temperature depending on how hard your buds are. So it takes still going out in the field and understanding, you know, these look like they're ready for a little more, you know, are they more sensitive to frost, or can they handle a little more frost? And the reverse happens in the fall, by the way. When we want the cranberries to ripen, it is true, cranberries ripen better with a little bit of frost on them. So if we give them a little bit of frost, a little more cold temperature, we will get a nicer, redder crop than if we keep irrigating and trying to make them keep growing. The other big thing that we found with our irrigation system is that it controls vine growth. And these 3 photos are, when you're into cranberries, it's very obvious what these things are, but I'm going to explain them in case you guys don't know every detail here. On the left is the bloom. So that's the little flowers that have the potential to become the cranberries. When you have a bloom, you want to have enough vine and enough strength in the vine to have a bloom, but you don't want to have so much canopy that the bees can't even find the flowers. The next field over, as you can see, that's one where it's very overgrown. It's almost up to the knees on the guy that I'm taking the picture of there. That got too much water. We've done this over the years. That was actually one of the years when it rained really hard. There's no control sometimes on how much water you get. And just like an apple tree, if it has a choice between growing fruit and growing plant, cranberry vine will grow plant. Because it goes, oh yes, I don't need to reproduce. I can just grow more vine. But if it gets stressed a little bit, then it'll grow fruit. So the secret with the guys with the automations, they can go on and they can see with the soil potentiometers how stressed the plants are. And then they can say, okay, tonight I'm going to water for 3 hours. And they program it into the fall's actually strong. And then the system will come on, it'll water for 3 hours. The next day they can look and see, how are we doing with respect to water? And that has really helped our farm. We first bought the farms that we have, built the one farm, we bought the other 2, and added this automation. And our yields have gone up 30 to 40% after adding this technology to the farm. And you can see on the right-hand side, you can see the little berries, the little lighter colored green things there. That's when it's not overgrown and the berries are starting to form. So this is another photo of the berries in the vine. For us, what we found is that good water management, what gives us consistently good yields. In the cranberry world, it's pretty common. Just like an apple tree, you can have a year where it's really heavy crop. The next year, a really light crop. The next year, a really big crop. Cranberries we harvest every year too, for those of you who are blueberry growers. I was talking to a couple of them earlier. The cranberry crop comes off every year, and the secret is to get it to be consistent. And we found that we can do that using the automation vortex. No, I'm talking fast. It's my usual stuff. Whoops. When we get to harvest in the fall, we get to see the results of what we do. We do actually flood all the fields. Right? At that point, the irrigation, the Horto system has been removed, and we do the wet harvest here because it's the best way to get the best quality berries that we do. Our cranberries are frozen, shipped all over the world, and so we're not in the fresh business where you buy them in bags at the grocery store, and then we also make products of these things year round. So we want to do the most efficient harvest. So water harvest is very important in the cranberry industry to do that. To get there, all of our farms have closed loop water systems. So we can take the water, we can flood a field, we can bring it back off, flood the next field. Each farm is a little different on how that's done, but it is the end of our, it's the end of our growing year. Then we'll reset again for the winter flood for the winter, and then start again the next year. Growing some. If you guys want to ask me questions, I'd love to ask questions about the automation and how we started it or what we did. I glossed over a lot of stuff there. So the question is, what do we use for the automation system itself for the pumps? It's a good question. We have two of our farms have electric pumps. So there is a automation module. So the Horto system, it used to be you bought the equipment, and now Horto is like any other provider of software service stuff. Now you lease it. So we rent it every year. And so part of what we rent is the sensing system that goes in the field. The other part is the automation controls that go in the pump house. So the electric pumps are very simple. It's just a start-stop signal that it goes out that our electrician wires in so that each of the pumps can start in sequence when we want to start. The one firm has a propane pump, an internal combustion engine, and that has a engine controller, same type of thing, that receives a signal from the Horto system at its time that we want to have water on the fields, and then it just starts itself up. Does that make sense? Yeah. But there's, depending on exactly what you have for pumps, you can gear it up to work with just about anything. What I learned.
Say closed loop system. Is that like, are you talking out of a pond or storage tank?
Yeah. See if I can. If I got any in the background here or not. No, I don't. So this is the farm on Heckman's Island, and Heckman's Island is an island in the ocean, and there was no natural water course. There's no river or anything to take the water from at all there, right? So we had to develop a way to have enough water to be able to grow and flood that farm. So there's a 90-acre watershed around that farm, and this is part of the environmental assessment. We went through this. And so it's like there's plenty of drumlins, and there's a peat bog in the middle. And there's 90 acres of water that when it rains comes down off that land. So we calculated and built a system that the drainage off the land goes into one pond, and then we pump it to a storage pond that we then use for the irrigation pond. So there's two ponds. One is below the elevations of the fields, and one is above the elevation, well, at the elevation of the fields. And so we're always recovering the water in the lower elevation pond and then moving it back up to our upper elevation pond so that it doesn't actually leave the farm. Because it's an island in the ocean, it's really important that we not lose the water because we can't go to the ocean and take salt water and put it on the cranberries. So I hope that explains that. But it's purposely built to be full recovery of all water.
When you flood a bed, you were recovering that water back to the pond and onto the next bed, or
Yeah.
just onto the next bed.
Yeah, in the winter, we take the pond is big enough to flood the fields, totally, usually. Sometimes it takes a little bit of rain to help, or snow to help with that. But when we're in harvest, we'll finish a field and we'll let the water go. And most of the time it goes back to the lower pond, gets pumped to the next pond, and then back onto the fields. Two of our farms have dedicated flood pipe systems now. We had the Tremont farm last year. You guys should ask us how we did with all this system.
That's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Last year we had what we would consider an average crop of our cranberries. One farm, the Hillsford farm, which tends to run a little bit growthy on a wet year, did pretty well on a dry year. It's a very good crop. Tremont farm, which is a very sandy soil, we had a pond down to not much water left to work with at all that we needed for. And so it gave us about a third of the crop that it gave us here for. That's 15 acres out of our 60 grade. And then the farm on the river gave us an average crop as well. So the farms that had a soil that was absorbed, that was easier to make wet and then use the raw water here. But the soils that were not as loose, that were tighter soil, like peat soil or the tighter sand, they did better last year, dry year. We kind of, when we're growing cranberries, two parts that we do it. I heard this growing course years ago. There were asking questions on what micronutrients can we add, what fertilizers can we add, and the agronomists, experienced agronomists, look, guys, you're growing sunshine in the farm. So you need to have sunshine. Last year we had lots of that, and you need to have water. And the farms that we could manage especially because the guys tend to be able to irrigate when they want to. We could irrigate 4 in the morning to 6 in the morning, right? And that's when because we do all the not irrigation, right? We spray the burn, right? So we try and do it all the day. Most of it's lost to evaporation. So by being able to time it, feels exactly what I do. Each field has a water control structure, we call it. So when we want to flood the fields, we block the ditch that we block the drainage from the field. You know, and it's intentionally done. So that it's a structure you put stop logs like boards in, and we can set the water level. And so then the water stays in the field. It's not a valve, it's a very simple process, right? Then you want the water out of the field. So in the winter, if you leave the water on all the time, after a while, what's underneath the ice starts to lose oxygen. And the plants start to get water takes the oxygen from the plants. It starts to deprive the plants. So we in the winter, we only flood for about a month. Then we let the water all back off. You know, during harvest, it's only on for a few days following that particular task. It depends on the farm a little bit and the amount of water that we can pump on. But usually it's a 2-day process for us to harvest. I should have brought you a couple harvest shots. The cranberries grow only a plant this fall. So they grow in the dry. So when I show you these photos here, that's how dry the land is. We have all stop logs at the water level. We actually want them to set their roots as they can, but we have this much plant sticking out the top. And when we go to harvest, with the first step, we go through with the harrow, so various off the line. You want to be able to see where you're going with that machine and be able to not have it too deep, because it is actually a tractor. We drive the field on tracks. And if it's too deep, I've seen falling out down with that machine, it's going to drown. It's getting, you know, it's too much water on the field. So we try to monitor that level down day 1 to only about 6 inches deep or 6 inches deep. And then the second overnight, pump the water up to the covered lawn. So generally, each field will be flooded in less than 24 hours. The Aylesford farm is a little better because we have a large pond just above the water level, so we don't have a bunch of inlets to the fields, and they get a lot more water, so you don't actually pump that one. For us to do 3 farms, 3 separate systems, it's around $5,000 per year, rent a year. It's around, they only do it on a round contract. But that lets see, we have 2 guys getting those 3 firms. And compared to paying somebody who's trying to cross protection, irrigation, you know, checking soil moistures and all that stuff, there's no way we can do that with $8,000 a year. Right? And the costs don't like it. It's easy, the system's easy to work with. The only problem is all you like the problem. It has a pressure sensor on the pump. So if it starts to pump with cross protection, don't get pressure because maybe something is jammed up in the pump or the pump is developed. It's like this farming, everything happens, right? And there's this lovely lady that calls in the middle of the night and says there's a problem with the system.
You want that call.
No, they do. And it also tells them when it's working well. And one of my guys, his favorite quote of me, yes, glad that lady's not going to call me anymore.
But your beds, because of the way cranberry beds are constructed, are all very similar, right? So you have one of those in one bed and say 15 beds in Louisiana or something.
That's good. Yeah. Every farm is,
There's something.
well, there's a variety of different farms, right?
The Jordan said, yeah, I'd be interested in that. But you got all kinds of crops, different situations.
What we found is there's quite a variety, even the cross protection wise, it's a big difference on where's the coldest spot on the farm. And it varies, like,
Right.
You know, it's slightly to the north or
I
slightly.
was thinking of the soil moisture.
And the soil moisture, we found that we don't use the moisture level as religiously as what we do looking at the amount of time. Like we use the soil moisture level, but not as the control. We use it as an indicator of relatively where we are with respect to moisture. So what we found with even in each field, there's small differences. Like you put it in here and 20 feet away, it'll be quite a bit drier. So you have to kind of pick a spot, and they usually move them around a few times till they find something that they think is average every year. So it is something, it's a tool that you have to learn
Right,
to work
you
with.
gotta jig it around.
Yeah,
have
it's not a
experience.
foolproof.
Yeah.
I'm an engineer, right? Yeah, so when I was looking after the one way in Lunenburg, I planted, and it's there, that's the blue issue of the year. And I was the one who grew the super big vines. There was a lot of water, getting applied that didn't need to be applied. Because I put it in a dry spot. You have to use your head with this stuff too. Yeah.
So did you run out of water? You mentioned that question, but you didn't actually.
Okay,
And Tremont, let's say.
well,
Let's say.
Aylesbury, definitely no trouble. Lunenburg, no trouble. Tremont, we got to August, and I started to hear some comments, but we're getting low on water. So I go up and I look, still water in the pond. And I'm like, okay, guys, how low is low, right? And it's been a month later, still hearing comments about we're running out of water.
Still have one.
But I'm looking at it going, the pond never went dry. So, what's the problem here? But when we went to harvest, we took the arrow through the field and it was like, why are the berries so small? And why are there so few of them? Right? And then we realized that we really did have more of a problem.
It's not a regular arrow, right?
Yeah, the arrow is still been a company called Gates Arrow. But they were going by that. It's basically like a spring peep arrow, but it's in had a peak that go down to the ground and then sideways. And so they can follow along slight contours and fall. And it's like taking your boot and kicking the berries off the vine. It's what knocks off. People think when we flood fields, they flop on their own. They don't, they're actually stuck on the point.
Thanks so much to all of our speakers today. Just give them all around the slides. That was awesome. Yeah, so this is officially the end of our session today. Don't feel like you have to rush out or anything. We do have the hall booked for long. So some of our speakers are here, the ones in person, so feel free to ask them some more questions. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming.